In the basement of an abandoned store after the nuclear war, a refrigerator hummed, without electricity. In a world where nothing worked anymore, this gray box in the corner was ice cold to the touch and glowed blue from within. Danny opened the door. On the shelf stood a single can of an energy drink that no longer existed, and at the bottom, an inscription: customized, prototype. But let's go back 3 minutes. Danny Cho was sorting energy drink samples by flavor in his sales floor, senior merchandiser, a cheap Casio on his wrist, a coffee stain on his cuff. Just another Tuesday, March 14th, 2025. And then the old fridge in the basement sucked him inside like a vacuum cleaner and spat him out face first into the dust. Danny coughs, rolls over, looks up. The sky is a dirty gray. Not a cloud, not a bird, not a sound. A rock is sticking out of his side. He rips it out and hisses. The blood is real. The pain is real. So it's not a dream. He stands up, looks around, and his jaw drops. He's standing in his store. The very same one. The same shelves, the same layout, the same stupid summer savings banner. Only the banner has faded to white. The shelves are rusted. The ceiling has crumbled in flakes. And where cash register number 3 used to stand, a black bush has broken through the tile. Danny steps on something crunchy, a newspaper, yellow and brittle. The date? August 12th, 2031. His Casio reads 2025, 6 years ahead. The headline screams in 3 words: exchange complete, evacuation canceled. A photo below it, a blurry smudge resembling a mushroom cloud. Danny puts the newspaper back, breathes, clenches his fists, forces himself to think. Okay, the store, destroyed. The year 2031. There was a war. This is reality. Some kind of reality. He walks along the shelves, empty. No cans, no boxes. Everything was taken out long ago. The refrigerated display cases gape like open mouths, mold inside. He reaches the service door and goes down to the basement. 14 steps. The railing is on the left. He knows them by heart. Downstairs, it's damp and slightly sweet. Phone, 34%. The flashlight reveals the familiar. Shelving units, a cart on its side, and in the corner, a refrigerator. The very one that had always stood there and that no one had ever turned on. Gray, with an illegible logo from the previous tenants. And this is where the strangest part begins. The refrigerator is humming. In a building where there's no electricity, in a world where nothing works. Danny places his palm on the door. The metal burns with cold. He pulls the handle. Inside, a dim blue light glows without a source. On the shelf, a can. Icy. Verdant Surge. Energy drink. A green leaf on a black background. The letters of the ingredients float as if alive. Danny turns the can over. Manufactured in 2024. The label reads, customized, prototype, not for sale. He puts it back. He closes it, opens it again. The can is still there. The light is on. The hum doesn't stop. And the merchandiser analyst's brain is working overtime. Fact 1, he's in the future. Fact 2, a post-nuclear war world. Fact 3, a refrigerator is running in the basement that shouldn't be running with a drink that shouldn't exist. Fact 4, this thing sucked him in here. Survive first, think later. Danny climbs out through the broken display window. It's worse outside. The street is dead. The asphalt is cracked, with black weeds sprouting from the cracks. The cars are rusty skeletons. The coffee shop where he used to get his lattes has collapsed. A sign on a pole. Old Haven Exclusion Zone. No entry without a commandant's pass. The place has a new name now. Danny walks. He doesn't know where. He just walks and counts his steps. A habit of getting nervous and counting. On the 327th step, he sees a man. A man in his 50s on a pile of rubble. A sawed-off shotgun on his knees. Yellow eyes. From illness or radiation. The man looks at Danny's clean shirt, at the badge, at his unblemished boots, and he cackles. Fresh meat. Brand new. Just hatched. Get off the road before dark, or they'll slit your throat for those boots. Danny looks at his boots. $40. Here, that's the price of life. He asks which way to go. The man nods east. The vagabond camp. They'll take you in if you've got something to offer. Don't go west. That's the Reaper's zone. Who's that? The man stops laughing. Marcus Holloway, the food baron. He controls everything from Old Haven to the coast. Whoever doesn't give up half gets nothing. Danny heads east. 40 minutes later, he finds the camp. A dozen shacks made of trash. A campfire. 30 skinny, dirty people stare at him like he's an alien. He gives his name, asks for a spot by the fire in exchange for information. A burly guy with a scar across his face reads his badge aloud. Senior Merchandiser. What's that? He stocked shelves. The burly guy is silent. Then he lets it slip. There are no more shelves, no goods, no stores, no food, no place. Danny sits down. They give him neither water nor food nor a blanket. But he knows one thing, how to listen. 7 years on the sales floor taught him. Before you sell, listen. And he listens. Food is everything here. A can of stew is currency. A sack of rice is a fortune. Fresh vegetables are a legend. The soil is poisoned. The rain is corrosive. Seeds are degenerating. Whoever holds the pre-war food reserves holds the world. They're called the food barons. The biggest is Marcus Reaper Holloway. Greenhouses, bunkers, an army that fights for dinner, not for an idea. He brings small communities under his control. If you don't hand over half your harvest, they burn everything you have. Danny takes it all in. He sorts it out in his mind. Food is the main resource. Food is the main shortage. Control over food is the main lever of power. And for the first time in this crazy day, he feels not fear, but professional interest. Night falls instantly, like a curtain. It's pitch black. No stars, no streetlights. The vagrants are asleep. One stands guard with a spear. Danny lies there and makes a plan. He needs food to survive, value to be useful, a secret to stay alive. He has a refrigerator. For 7 years, he made people want what they didn't need. He turned a $1 energy drink into a $5 one at the festival, a $1.50 bottle of water into a $10 one at the airport. Context creates price. Scarcity creates value. And in a world where everything is scarce, the one who creates the context is the master. Casio shows 11:47 p.m. That's exactly what time it was when the fridge dragged him away. Danny gets up. He waits until the guard turns away, and he heads back to the store in complete darkness. He stumbles. He falls. He walks. He goes down to the basement. The fridge hums. A can on the shelf. He doesn't touch it. He sits down next to it and waits for midnight. The Casio ticks. 11:58. 11:59. Midnight. A click inside, as if someone had set a glass on the table. Danny opens the door. 2 cans on the shelf, an old green one and a new one, red. He reads the label twice. Verdant Surge, Cat's Eye, duration 24 hours. He takes the red one, turns it over in his hands. Cold, heavy, real. Doesn't open it, hides it in his pocket. Walks back to camp and thinks. 1 can at midnight, a random ability, a fun of action. This isn't magic, it's merchandise. And Danny knows better than anyone in this dead world what to do with merchandise. Danny returned to the vagabond's camp before dawn. He lay down in his spot by the extinguished fire, the can in his pocket pressed against his side. Red tin. Cat's eye vision. He didn't sleep. He lay there and thought. Morning came gray and insipid. Light seeped through the dust curtain as if through dirty glass. The vagabonds stirred. Someone built a fire. Someone divided half a can of corned beef among 12 people. Danny got nothing. He was an outsider. No food, no weapon, no story. The big guy with the scar walked up to him, said Danny had to leave. They don't feed those who don't bring anything here. Danny didn't argue. He stood up, brushed himself off, and he left. But not just like that. Before leaving, he did one thing. He walked up to the woman who was dividing the canned meat. He looked at the can. He said that if she angled the knife when opening it, the meat wouldn't stick to the sides, and they'd get a third more of the contents. The woman looked at him like he was crazy, but she tried it. A piece of meat that usually stuck to the sides fell out of the can. Danny nodded and left. A small thing, but now they'd remember him. The first rule of merchandising: leave a mark. Not the product, a mark. He walked through the ruins of Old Haven, mapping it out in his head. Streets, buildings, what was destroyed, what was still standing, where people were, where it was empty. In 2 hours, he'd covered about 5 kilometers. Old Haven was big. It had once been a suburb. Shopping centers, residential neighborhoods, schools. Now the skeleton of a city. But not empty. Danny saw signs of life. Smoke from a chimney in a converted garage. A clothesline with laundry drying between 2 balconies. A patch of something pale green behind a fence made of car doors. People lived there. Few. Quiet. Like mice in the walls of a dead house. Danny memorized everything. By noon, he had found what he was looking for. 3 kilometers north of the store stood a large warehouse complex, a former wholesale warehouse. 2 stories, concrete walls, steel gates, locked. On the gates, someone had painted a circle P and the word dark. Danny understood. It was dark inside. No windows, no light. No one went in because there was nothing to light the way. Flashlights were a rarity in the Wastelands. Batteries even more so. And in complete darkness, any noise turns into a monster. He looked at his watch. 1:20. Almost 11 hours until midnight, when the ability would expire. He could wait until evening, go in the dark, use his cat-like vision. But first, he had to drink the can. Danny walked around the corner. He sat down in the shadow of a concrete wall. He pulled the red can out of his pocket. He turned it over in his hands. An opened can loses its potency in 15 minutes if not drunk. He knew this from somewhere. He didn't remember where from. He just knew, as if the information had come along with the can. A click, the hiss of gas, the smell. Strange. Not like a regular energy drink. It smelled like something between mint and wet earth. Danny brought the can to his lips. He drank. The taste was cold, not in his mouth, inside, as if he'd swallowed a piece of ice that didn't melt but spread through his body. 30 seconds later, the world changed. Not the whole world, just the light. The shadows became transparent. The dark corners stopped being dark. Danny looked at the wall in front of him. In the shadow beneath the ledge, he could see every crack, every pebble, every ant. He turned his head, peered into the gap between the concrete blocks. The darkness inside was like twilight. Everything was visible. Danny smiled, for the first time in 2 days. A professional smile. The smile of a salesman who realized he had in his hands a product that no one else had. He stood up and walked toward the warehouse. The main gate was locked, but the side door for staff was hanging by a single hinge. Danny squeezed his way inside. Darkness. Total darkness for an ordinary person. For Danny, twilight. He could see everything. The warehouse was enormous. 4 tiered racks stretched 100 meters into the depths. Most of the shelves were empty. Someone had already been here, but hadn't made it to the end, because it was darkest at the end. Danny walked down the aisle between the racks. Dust, rat droppings, scraps of packaging. On the 3rd tier, he spotted a box, a whole one, unopened. He climbed the rack like a ladder. The box was military issue, green, labeled MRE, meal ready to eat ration. He opened it. Inside were 24 individual packets, each vacuum sealed. Expiration date 2027. But Danny knew from his work that Army MREs are designed to last 50 years at room temperature. These were perfect. 24 rations. In a world where a can of stew pays for a night under a roof, this was a fortune. Danny stood on the shelf in complete darkness and looked at the box. And he wasn't thinking about how to eat it, but about how to sell it. No, not sell it, pass it on. He went downstairs. He searched the rest of the warehouse, found a few more things. A roll of tarpaulin, a coil of rope, a box of household matches, 2 empty canisters, a toolkit in a rusty little case. All useful stuff, but not food. Food was the main thing. Danny carried the box of MREs outside, hid it in a spot he'd scouted out earlier, a hole under an overturned van 100 meters from the warehouse. Covered it with trash, placed a piece of rusty hood on top. No one would notice. Then he went back for the tarp and tools, hid them separately, 2 stashes, not just one. A rule from work: never keep all your goods in one place. If you lose one warehouse, you lose everything. If you have 2, you'll still have half. By evening, he was exhausted, hungry. The last time he'd eaten was yesterday morning, a turkey sandwich in the basement of a store in 2025, in another world. His stomach was growling. Danny sat down by his stash and opened an MRE. Inside was rice with chicken, liver, a packet of jam, instant coffee, a match to heat it up. He heated the rice, ate it, slowly, counting every bite. The rice was bland and dry, but it was food. Real food. His. He left the coffee and jam, not for himself. A tool. A commodity. Currency. 23 rations remained. Danny sat and made plans. He needed shelter. He needed people. He needed to become useful. Not strong. Useful. In a world of strength, the stronger one survives, but not for long. In a world of usefulness, the one who is needed survives. That lasts. He knew from work, a store security guard can be replaced in a day. A merchandiser who knows how to boost sales by 40% will never be replaced. That evening, he went looking for a community. Not a camp of vagrants, a community. A place where people live together, share food, protect one another. That's how it should be. Humans are herd animals, even after the end of the world. He found a community northeast of the warehouses, a small one, 10 houses made of rubble, a fence made of sheet metal and car doors, a watchtower made from a water tower. Inside, about 40 people, old people, children, 3 adult men, 5 women, all thin, all gray from malnutrition. An old man stood at the gate with a shotgun. Danny approached. He raised his hands. He said he'd come unarmed. The old man looked at him for a long time. Then he called out to someone. A second old man came out of the house, wearing glasses, with a straight back. Something in his bearing betrayed an education. Danny read people out of habit. This man had once worn a suit and tie. The old man in glasses introduced himself as Henry. He asked who Danny was and what he wanted. Danny didn't lie. He said he'd arrived recently, that he had food, and that he wanted to live here. Henry narrowed his eyes. He asked how much food he had. Danny pulled a single MRE ration out from under his jacket. He placed it on the table by the gate. He said one sentence. My name is Danny. This is a down payment. The remaining 23 when we come to an agreement. Silence. Henry stared at the ration, at the military markings, at the date, at the vacuum-sealed packaging. His hands trembled. He looked up at Danny. Tears welled in his eyes, not from joy, from understanding. 24 rations. For a community of 40 people, this isn't just food. It's 2 months of life if stretched out. Henry took off his glasses, wiped them with a dirty handkerchief, put them back on, called the others. People came out. They looked at the rations as if they were a miracle. A child of about 5 reached for the package. His mother pulled him back. Henry said Danny could come in, that they'd talk. Danny went in. They led him to Henry's house. Small, 1 room, a table, 2 stools, a barrel stove. Henry sat across from him. He asked where the ration pack came from. Danny said he found it at a warehouse to the north. Henry asked which one exactly. Danny described it. Henry shook his head. He said that warehouse had been searched 3 times. It was empty. Danny said they'd searched with lanterns, which were in short supply, but he'd found a way to see in the dark. Henry raised an eyebrow. He didn't ask how, not yet. Danny could tell Henry was smart, that he'd noticed the inconsistency. But he could also tell Henry was hungry, and that hunger trumps suspicion. For now. They made a deal. Danny would hand over 3 rations at once, the rest 2 a week, in exchange for a roof over his head, a place in the community, a voice at the meetings. Danny agreed, but he added one condition. He wanted to inspect all the community's supplies, everything, down to the last crumb. Henry frowned. He asked why. Danny explained. He said that in a past life, he had managed how people stored and consumed food, that he could make the community's supplies last longer, much longer. Henry looked at him for a long time. Then he nodded. That evening, Danny inspected the community's storage area, a small basement under one of the houses. There wasn't much on the shelves. 7 cans of stew, 3 cans of beans, a bag of something that looked like flour, a bundle of dried meat of unknown origin, a can of murky water, 2 bottles of vinegar, a bag of salt. Danny counted. That was enough for 40 people. At the current ration, it would last 10 days, maybe 12. And that was it. He left the basement, sat down on the steps, looked up at the stars that weren't there. A black sky, a black night. In his pocket was an empty red tin cylinder. His night vision was still working. There were 3 hours left until midnight. Danny took some instant coffee out of his ration, a packet of jam. He walked over to Henry, held it out. Henry looked at the coffee, at the jam, at Danny. Quietly asked why. Danny said it was just coffee, not a bribe, not a bargain, just coffee. Henry took it. Danny went back to his place, lay down on a mattress stuffed with rags, closed his eyes. Numbers swirled in his head. 40 people, 10 days' worth of supplies, 1 refrigerator, 1 can a day, a random ability, 23 rations, winter in 4 months, the Reaper on the horizon. And he was alone, in a strange world, with knowledge of floor plans and upselling techniques. The Casio beeped. Midnight. Somewhere in the store's basement, a refrigerator clicked. A new can. Danny didn't go get it. In the morning. Today, he was too tired. In the morning, Danny woke up to a scream. A child's. He jumped off the mattress and ran outside. At the community gate stood a boy of about 7, wailing. A woman beside him, his mother. She was holding a second child, an infant. Henry was already there, talking to someone outside the gate. Danny stepped closer. 2 men were standing outside the gate. Burly, in identical jackets made of heavy fabric. One had a machete on his belt. The other had a homemade rifle slung over his shoulder. The jackets bore the same emblem, an ear of wheat crossed out by a knife. The Reaper's symbol. Danny stopped 5 paces away and listened. One of the men spoke calmly, like a bureaucrat at a reception. He said that Marcus Holloway was offering protection, that this was the third black winter in a row, that without the Reaper's support, the community wouldn't survive until spring. The terms were simple: half the harvest, half the supplies, half of whatever they found, and the community could sleep soundly. Henry listened in silence. His face was stony. The Reaper's second-in-command added that this was not a request, that last month the Birchwood community had refused. Their greenhouse had been burned down at night. 2 people had died. Henry asked when an answer was needed. The first man said, "In 3 days." They turned and left. Danny watched them go. He saw them walking, confidently, unhurriedly, like people who know they have power behind them. Henry stood by the gate, gripping the gatepost. His knuckles were white. Danny walked up to him. Henry looked at him, and for the first time, Danny saw fear on the old man's face. Henry said that they didn't have half. They didn't even have a quarter. If they gave it to the Reaper, the children would start dying in a week. If they didn't give it, the Reaper would come and take everything. Danny asked how many men the Reaper had. Henry said that according to rumors, about 300 fighters, plus the support staff, plus the workers in the greenhouses, about 700 in total, a whole army. The community had 3 men capable of handling weapons: a shotgun with 6 rounds, 2 knives, a crossbow without arrows. Danny nodded. He said he needed to think it over. He went back to his room. He sat down on the mattress. He thought. Fighting is out of the question. There's nowhere to run. Submission means a slow death. That leaves the 4th option: become so useful that destroying you would cost more than putting up with you. But that's a long game, and 3 days is a short time. Danny got up and went to the store for a new can. Basement, fridge, hum, door. 2 cans on the shelf, a green one with no ability label. He already knew the green one was the first, the basic one, the one that didn't grant any power, just a drink. And a new one, blue. Verdant Surge. Perfect memory for 24 hours. Danny took the blue one. He left the green one. He went outside, opened it, drank it. It tasted like liquid metal, cold and smooth. A minute later, the world hadn't changed, but his brain had. His brain was different. Danny looked at the ruins and remembered everything. Every textbook he'd read in school, every lecture at university, every sales training session, every report he'd written over 7 years of work, every face, every number, every word he'd ever heard. It was as if someone had opened every drawer in his head at once. He remembered the tiramisu recipe his grandmother used to make when he was 6. He remembered the formula for calculating inventory turnover. He remembered the exact $1 exchange rate on March 3rd, 2021. He remembered the map of Washington State. He remembered everything. Danny ran back to the community. He asked Henry for some paper. Henry gave him a scrap of wrapping paper and a stub of a pencil. Danny wrote. For 3 hours straight. He wrote down everything he thought would be useful. Recipes. 216 recipes using ready-made products and canned goods. How to make a cheese substitute from beans and powdered milk. How to make a preservative from vinegar and salt that would triple the shelf life of meat. How to make glue from flour and water. How to make wall insulation from glue and paper. A diagram of the simplest hydroponic setup. A diagram of water filtration through sand and charcoal. A table of seed compatibility with soil types. Principles of rotating supplies by expiration date. A method for calculating daily calorie requirements for different age. He wrote until the pencil was worn down to a stub. Then he asked for another one. Henry gave it to him. He looked at Danny in silence. By evening, Danny had 18 sheets of paper, both sides covered in small handwriting. He went to Henry. He laid the sheets on the table. He said it was worth more than 23 rations. Henry began to read. He read for a long time. He took off his glasses, wiped them, put them back on, read on. When he got to the water filtration recipe, he looked up. He looked at Danny. He asked who he really was. Not a merchandiser, who he really was. Danny told the truth, partly. He said he had a good memory and a poor sense of time, that he remembered many things from the world before the silence because he had been young and had read many books. Henry didn't believe him. Danny could tell. But Henry also saw 18 sheets of information that could save the community. And hunger once again overcame suspicion. That evening, Danny gathered all the adults of the community, 17 people. He laid out the contents of a single MRE on the table. He arranged each item separately. Rice, chicken, crackers, jam, coffee, sugar, salt, a match, a heating packet. And he began to explain. Each item has maximum value only in the right context. Rice on its own is just rice. But rice cooked with beans from their supplies and seasoned with salt and a dash of vinegar is a meal. A meal that doesn't just feed you, but creates the feeling of a normal meal. And the feeling of a normal meal is something people haven't had in 23 years. Coffee from a ration pack is worth little. But coffee served hot in the morning in a clean mug to a person who hasn't had coffee in 5 years is a priceless commodity. Cookies from a ration pack are dry and tasteless. But a cookie soaked in hot water with jam and served to a child is a moment a mother will remember for the rest of her life. And a mother who remembers such moment will be loyal to the community that gave it. People listened. Some didn't understand, but some did. One of the women, young, in overalls, with shoulder-length black hair. She listened more intently than anyone else. Danny noticed her hands, calloused, from the earth, the hands of someone who works the soil. She asked how he planned to trade if they had nothing to trade. Danny replied that they had recipes, they had knowledge, they had water from the filter he would build in 2 days. They have the skill to turn the gray sludge from beans into something that tastes good. In a world where everyone eats the same junk, whoever offers variety isn't selling food, but an emotion. The woman in overalls didn't smile, but she nodded. Danny found out later that her name was Ji-eun Park, the community's only farmer, the only person who knows how to grow anything in this land. That night, Danny lay awake, thinking about the past 3 days, about the Reaper's ultimatum, about the half that's missing, about the 40 people who would start starving in 10 days. About the refrigerator that gave out 1 can a day, about the fact that his perfect memory would vanish by midnight tomorrow, but the notes would remain. He wrote down 30 more recipes by the light of the campfire. His hands ached, his eyes watered, but he wrote, because tomorrow his memory would be gone, and everything not written down would be lost. By dawn, he had 26 sheets. Henry found him asleep at the table, face buried in the paper, a pencil in his hand. Henry stood over him, covered him with a blanket, the first gesture of care for another. Morning of the 3rd day, the day of the Reaper's answer. Danny woke up. The ability was gone. He was ordinary again. But the notes lay in a stack, 26 sheets, over 200 recipes, schemes, tables, formulas, the knowledge of the entire world imprinted on paper in a single night. He washed his face, ate rice and beans, looked at his watch. The Reaper's men would arrive by evening. Danny had a plan, not perfect, not brilliant, but the only one. He asked Henry to gather the council, the 3 elders of the community. Henry, a woman named Ruth, a former nurse who had become the storekeeper, and a man named Tom, the only one in the community who knew how to shoot, a former hunter. Danny told them the following: you can't refuse the Reaper, but you can't give the Reaper half either. So you have to give him what he'll accept, but not what he asks for. Henry asked what that meant. Danny explained. The Reaper wants food. That's his business. He collects food from everyone and redistributes it through his army. But the Reaper isn't a cook. His people eat the same gray porridge as everyone else. If you offer the Reaper not raw ingredients, but a finished product, a dish, a recipe, a cooking skill, then the Reaper will get something no one else has. And what no one else has is always worth more than everyone has. Tom said it was madness, that the Reaper doesn't bargain, he takes. Danny nodded. He said Tom was right. The Reaper takes. But the Reaper also thinks. And if you give him a reason to think, instead of just taking, you can buy time. And time is the only thing they need right now. Ruth asked how much time. Danny said he needed a month. 1 month. To set up a water filter. To teach people how to cook with what they have. To create a product they can trade with the caravans. So the community becomes not just mouths to feed, but a supplier of value. Henry was silent. Ruth was silent. Tom spat on the floor and walked out. Henry asked, what if the Reaper didn't agree? Danny said that then they'd give up 3 rations and say that's all they have, half of the small amount, and they'd ask for a delay until the end of the month. The Reaper would agree, because 3 MREs is more than half of 0, and 0 is what he'd get if he burned the community down. Henry took off his glasses, wiped them, put them back on, said that Danny was either a genius or a madman, and that in either case, it was better than nothing. That evening, the Reaper's men arrived. The same 2, machete and rifle. Danny went out to meet them with Henry. Henry did the talking. Danny stood nearby and watched. Read. The one with the machete was nervous, fidgeting with his hand, didn't want to be there, just following orders. The one with the rifle was calm, a professional. This one was more dangerous. Henry handed over 3 MREs. He said the community was small and poor, that this was all they had, that in a month there would be more, because they now had a man who knew how to find food. The one with the rifle looked at Danny, appraisingly, like a buyer looking at merchandise. He asked who he was. Danny held his gaze. He said he was a cook. The one with the rifle smirked. He said the Reaper didn't need cooks. Danny replied that the Reaper didn't need cooks until he tasted real food. After that, he would need nothing but cooks. The man with the rifle was silent for a moment. Then he nodded. He took the rations. He said they had a month. If there wasn't enough in a month, it wouldn't be him coming. The Reaper would come. And no cook would help him. They left. Danny stood at the gate and watched them leave. His hands didn't shake. His voice didn't waver. Inside, everything was shaking like in a centrifuge. But on the outside, he was calm. 7 years in sales had taught him one thing. The customer buys confidence. If the salesman is nervous, the customer walks away. If the salesman is calm, the customer listens. He had just sold 2 armed men the idea that a small, destitute community was worth waiting for. 3 rations for a month of life. The best deal of his career. A month. 30 days. Danny woke up on his 4th morning in the community and got to work. First things first, water. He chose a spot by the eastern wall of the fence where the ground was softer. He dug a hole a meter deep with his hands and a shovel made from a flattened pipe. He laid a layer of small stones at the bottom, sand on top, coal from the stove on top, more sand on top, cloth on top, the simplest filter. He poured in murky water from a canister. 2 hours later, clear water began to flow from the bottom. Not perfect, but 10 times better than what they'd been drinking until now. Henry stood nearby and watched. He said that in 23 years, no one had thought of it. Danny replied that they'd thought of it long before the silence. They'd just forgotten. Memory is the first thing lost when the world falls apart. By evening on the 4th day, the community had clean water. Danny went to the fridge at midnight. A new can, yellow, Verdant Surge, double physical strength for 24 hours. He spent the entire next day building. He hauled concrete blocks like cardboard boxes. He reinforced the east wall. He put up a second gate. He dug 3 holes for the foundations of new buildings. People watched him with their mouths agape. A man weighing 70 kilograms carried a concrete slab on his shoulders, like a backpack. Tom approached him that evening, asked how it was going. Danny said it was just a good day. Tom didn't believe him. But the walls were standing, and Tom was a practical man. Walls are more important than explanations. Day 6. A can. White. Verdant Surge. The ability to park cars perfectly. Danny looked at the label. He looked at a world where not a single car was running. He laughed, for the first time in 6 days, sincerely, until he cried. A useless ability. Absolutely useless. But you know what? There are no useless days. Danny spent the day without his superpower. He cooked. He took out his recipe notes. From the community's supplies, he pulled out beans, flour, salt, vinegar, dried meat. In 6 hours, he prepared 5 different dishes. Bean porridge with herbs he'd picked behind the fence. Flour and salt flatbreads baked on a stone by the fire. Meat broth made from dried meat and filtered water. A bean paste mashed with vinegar and salt. A Swedish porridge made from soaked crackers found in a stash, with jam from his ration pack. He set the table. He didn't just put out the bowls. He set the table. He found a relatively clean piece of cloth, spread it out, arranged the bowls, each dish in its place. Porridge on the left, flatbreads in the center, broth on the right, paste separately, dessert at the end. It was funny, absurd. A table made of 2 planks on trestles, bowls made from tin cans, a tablecloth from a scrap of canvas. But it was a set table, with seating, with order, with presentation. People came, sat down, looked. No one ate. Danny asked why. Ruth said they didn't remember how to do it, to sit down at the table, at a set table. The child reached for a flatbread. This time, the mother didn't pull him back. The boy took the flatbread, took a bite, chewed with his eyes closed. The mother watched him, her lips trembling. Then she ate herself. Bean porridge with herbs. She ate slowly, as if afraid the food would disappear. One by one, people began to eat, quietly, without speaking. Someone was crying, someone was laughing. An old man at the end of the table was eating broth and wiping his face with a trembling hand. Henry sat at the head of the table. He ate a flatbread with bean paste. He chewed slowly. He put down the flatbread. He took off his glasses. He wiped them, put them back on, looked at Danny, said one word. "Thank you." Danny nodded, something inside him, not from sadness, from understanding. These people hadn't eaten a proper meal in 23 years. 23 years of gray porridge, gray water, a gray world. And now a guy from 2025 had set 5 bowls on a rag in front of them, and for a second, the world had turned colorful. It wasn't magic from a can, it was recipes, knowledge, the memory of a world that knew how to eat. And Danny realized he'd found his real merchandise. Not rations, not cans. Food with soul. Day 7. A can, orange, Verdant Surge. The ability to understand the language of birds. Danny grunted. He drank. He walked out the gate and discovered that there were birds in the wastelands. Not many, but there were some. A raven sat on a pole 100 meters from the settlement. Danny approached. The raven cawed. And Danny understood. Not words, not literally, but the meaning. The raven was talking about water, about a place to the west, a stream. Danny asked how far. The raven replied that it was 2 flights away. Danny didn't know how far that was, but he headed west. An hour later, he found the stream. Small, muddy, but flowing, living water. Not from a canister, not from a puddle, from underground. He returned, Told Henry. Not about the raven, about the stream. Said he'd found it by accident. Henry sent Tom to check it out. Tom returned 3 hours later. Confirmed it. A stream. It could be filtered. It could be piped to the community. Water supply. People hugged each other. Ruth cried. The children ran around and shouted. Danny stood to the side and smiled. Not professionally. Genuine. Day 8. 9. 10. The banks were different. The ability to sense lies. Danny used this to check the caravan that had come to the community to trade. The caravan driver lied that he had no medicine. Danny sensed the lie. He didn't accuse him. He simply made an offer. 3 servings of his bean paste with flatbreads, in exchange for whatever was in the third sack on the right. The caravan leader turned pale. The third sack contained antibiotics. 4 packages. The caravan leader asked how Danny knew. Danny smiled and said he always knew where the goods were. That was his job. The caravan driver handed over 2 packs in exchange for the food and the bean paste recipe written on a piece of paper. He walked away shaking his head. Danny gave the antibiotics to Ruth. Ruth held the packs the way you hold a newborn, carefully, with both hands. She said these were the first antibiotics in the community in 3 years. That last winter, 2 children had died from an infection that could have been cured with a single pill. Danny nodded. He said nothing. He turned and walked away. He sat down behind the community center, alone. He leaned against the wall. He closed his eyes. 2 children. 1 pill. This world didn't kill with explosions. It killed with little things. With the absence of what, in Danny's world, cost $3 at the pharmacy. Day 12. Danny built a filter for water from the stream. He laid a pipe made from plastic pipes he'd found in the ruins. 200 meters. 2 days of work. The community helped. Everyone. Even the kids hauled rocks. Tom helped in silence. He didn't ask questions. He just worked. When the water started flowing into the community, Tom walked up to Danny. He said he used to think of him as a chatterbox. Now he didn't. That was the highest praise Tom was capable of. Danny accepted it in silence. 2 weeks. Halfway through. Danny surveyed the community. The walls were reinforced. There was water. Food supplies had been replenished, with 5 rations from the cache, plus 3 successful trades with caravans. Antibiotics. The recipes were working. People had started eating a more varied diet. Ji-eun came to him every morning, silently. She sat down next to him while he cooked. She watched. Sometimes she asked why he added vinegar to the beans, or why he mixed the flour with salt before kneading. Danny explained. Not like a teacher, like a colleague. She nodded. She went back to her garden beds. She returned in the evening. Once she brought a handful of something pale green. She said they were the leaves of a plant she was trying to grow. She didn't know what it was, but it was growing in this soil. Danny tasted a leaf, bitter, with a hint of sourness. It tasted like arugula, or something close to arugula. He added the leaves to the bean porridge. The flavor changed. It became vibrant, fresh. Ji-eun tasted it. For the first time, she looked at Danny not with suspicion, but with something resembling respect. She said, "He doesn't ask to be fed. He feeds himself." Danny said nothing, but he remembered. Day 20. The caravan brought news. The Reaper is consolidating his position. He's buying up supplies across the sector. The communities in the south are already under his control. Birchwood surrendered after their greenhouse burned down. 3 communities in the west have united, but they have no food for the winter. Winter is 2.5 months away. The 3rd black winter. The sun had already begun to fade. The gray sky grew grayer. The temperature was dropping by 1 degree a day. Danny sat on the roof of the community house in the evening and looked at the horizon. Something was glowing in the west, a dim orange glow. Not the sunset, a fire. Someone was burning. Someone's greenhouse. Someone's life. He took out his notes. He reread them. 26 pages, over 200 recipes, schemes. But that's not enough. Recipes feed people, but they don't protect them. Walls protect, but they don't feed. We need both. And we need more people. 40 people isn't a community, it's a target. Day 23. A bottle. Purple. Verdant Surge. The ability to talk to pigeons. Danny looked at the bottle, at the world outside the window. He sighed. He drank. He walked out the gate. A pigeon was sitting on a piece of broken wall 20 paces away. The only pigeon in all of the Wastelands, or so it seemed. Danny walked over. The pigeon tilted its head. Danny spoke. The pigeon answered. 3 hours. Danny sat with the pigeon for 3 hours and learned more than in all the previous 3 weeks. The pigeon flew far. Pigeons see everything from above. This pigeon knew where the Reaper's warehouses were. 4 locations. 2 to the west, 1 to the south, 1 in the center of Old Haven. The pigeon knew where the glass people lived. Cultists from the radioactive wastelands to the east. Dozens, maybe hundreds, with scorched skin and burning eyes. The pigeon knew that to the north there was a community hiding in a former school. About 60 people. They have weapons but no food. Pigeon knew there was a field south of the stream, not contaminated, or not very contaminated. Grass grows there. Green. Real green. Danny memorized it. He wrote it down. He drew a map on a scrap of paper. By evening, he had a map of the sector. Rough, but usable. He went back to Henry, put the map on the table. Henry looked at it, asked where it came from. Danny said he'd scouted it out. Henry looked at his clean boots, at the lack of dust on his clothes. Danny hadn't gone more than 100 meters from the community all day. Henry knew that. But the map was accurate, at least in the places Henry knew. Henry took off his glasses, wiped them, put them back on. A long look. He said that one day Danny would tell him the truth. Danny replied that he would tell him one day, when it was safe to do so. Henry nodded. A silence hung between them, the kind that happens between people who don't fully trust each other, but respect one another enough not to ask unnecessary questions. Night. The 24th day. Danny lay on his mattress and thought about the moon. 6 days left. Then the Reaper's men would come. And this time, 3 rations wouldn't be enough. Day 25. 6 days until the Reaper's men arrive. Danny got up before dawn. He went to the fridge. A new can. A silver one. Verdant Surge. Enhanced sense of smell for 24 hours. He opened it and drank it right there. The taste was like sniffing a bouquet of flowers through ice-cold water. The world exploded with scents. Dust had a scent. Rust had a scent. Stone had a scent. Danny stepped outside and was overwhelmed by the flood of information. Every square foot of space smelled different. The ground near the commune smelled of acid and something sweet. The grass beyond the fence smelled bitter. The people inside the commune smelled of smoke and sweat and sickness. One of the old men smelled different. Sharper, like metal. Danny walked over to Ruth. He said the old man named Will needed a blood test. Something was wrong with his liver. Ruth asked how he knew. Danny said he'd seen similar symptoms. Ruth examined Will. An enlarged liver, yellowish whites of the eyes that no one had noticed in the gray light of the wasteland. Antibiotics wouldn't help. But Ruth adjusted his diet. She cut out the dried meat. She added more beans and greens from Ji-yun. Will started to feel better after 3 days. Danny didn't explain. He just moved on. His sense of smell gave him something else. The scent of gunpowder. Faint, barely perceptible, from the south. Someone had been shooting a kilometer from the community. Danny told Tom. Tom grabbed a shotgun and went out to scout. He returned 2 hours later. He said that a loner was hunting to the south. A man, shooting rats. Tom brought him back. The loner turned out to be a tall, thin man in his 40s, tattered clothes, army boots, a scar across his left eye. He couldn't see out of that eye. His right eye looked sharp and attentive, like a rifle scope. He called himself Ridge, a former Marine, alone for 20 years after the silence. Didn't trust people, didn't want to join the community. He was just passing through, hunting for dinner. Danny looked at Ridge. 30 seconds. A habit, reading people. Ridge was hungry. You could tell by the way he licked his lips as he looked at the community's campfire. Ridge was lonely. You could tell by the way he stood as far away from everyone as possible, but turned to face the group rather than turn his back. Ridge wanted to stay. You could tell because he didn't leave right after Tom stopped watching him. But Ridge didn't know how to ask. 20 years alone. You forget how to ask. You forget how to talk to people. You become a weapon, not a person. Danny walked up to him, didn't offer him a place to stay, didn't offer him food, offered him a job. He said the community needed someone who could shoot, who knew tactics, who could teach others. He said it wasn't charity, it was a trade. Ridge gets a roof over his head and food. The community gets protection and an instructor. Ridge looked at him with one eye for a long time. Then he asked what kind of food. Danny said, "Let's go." He led him to the table. He set a bowl of bean porridge with greens and a flatbread with broth in front of him. Ridge sat down. He picked up a spoon. He tasted the porridge. He stopped. He chewed slowly, swallowed, tried the broth, stopped again. 20 years. For 20 years he'd eaten raw rats, boiled roots, beetles, whatever he could find. No taste, no smell, no meaning. And here was porridge, with greens, with salt, with a flatbread. Ridge ate in silence. Finished. Set down the bowl. Looked at Danny. Said 2 words. "I'm staying." Danny nodded. Tom stood to the side and watched. He recognized Ridge as a professional, a former Marine with 20 years of survival experience in the Wastelands. That was better than any weapon. Tom approached Danny that evening. He said that Ridge knew 12 kinds of traps, 4 types of ambushes, and could shoot from 300 meters with one eye more accurately than Tom could with both. Tom said Ridge was a godsend. Danny replied that he wasn't a godsend. He was a mess. Tom didn't get it. It didn't matter. Day 26. Danny headed north, toward the school, toward the community the pigeon had told him about. He walked for 4 hours. He found it. A former high school. Brick walls, windows boarded up with sandbags, a lookout post on the roof. They spotted him from 200 meters away. 3 men came out with weapons, assault rifles, real ones. Military issue. Danny raised his hands, said he'd come unarmed, said he had a proposal. They let him inside. About 60 people lived inside the school, mostly adults, many former military personnel. They had walls, they had assault rifles, they had ammunition, but they had no food, none at all. They were eating rats and boiled bark. 2 were on the verge of death from exhaustion. Their leader, a woman about 35 years old, short haircut, a hard look in her eyes. She called herself Captain Morgan, not her real name, a call sign. She asked what he wanted. Danny laid 5 MREs on the table, 5 of the remaining 17. Morgan looked at them. Her people behind her tensed up. Their rifles weren't lowered. Danny said the following. In 5 days, the Reaper's people would come to his community. They would demand more than he could give. If the community refuses, the Reaper will burn it down. Danny's community has food and water and recipes and knowledge. Morgan's community has walls and weapons and fighters. Separately, both communities are dead. The Reaper will crush one with hunger and the other with force. Together, they are alive. Food and protection, knowledge and weapons. Morgan listened. Her face was impassive. Then she asked why she should trust a man who had come alone and unarmed to a strange place. Danny replied that that was exactly why, because he had come alone and unarmed. If he had wanted to deceive them, he would have brought an army, but he had brought 5 rations and a proposal. Morgan thought for a moment. Then she said she wanted to see his community. Danny agreed. Tomorrow. They shook hands. Danny noticed that Morgan squeezed his hand a little tighter than necessary, testing him. He squeezed back. Not harder, just the same. Morgan raised an eyebrow slightly. Danny returned in the evening. He told Henry. Henry listened. He took off his glasses, wiped them, put them back on. Said it was dangerous, that the military could just take everything and leave. Danny said they could, but they wouldn't. Because you can take food once, but you can get food every week. And that the military understands that better than civilians. Supply is what any army relies on. Henry nodded, slowly. The 17th day. Morgan arrived with 5 fighters. She surveyed the community, a water filter, a water line from the stream, fortified walls, supplies. She saw Danny cooking for the communal table. She tasted the bean porridge with flatbread. She tasted the broth. She tasted the pasta. Danny watched her face. Morgan gave nothing away. Iron self-control. But her fighter on the right, a young guy, about 20, he was eating and his hands were shaking, and his eyes were shining. Morgan saw it. Danny saw it. They both saw the same thing. Food isn't just calories. Food is what makes people human. Morgan stood up. She said she agreed to the alliance. The terms would be discussed, but the basic principle was simple. Her people would provide security. His people would provide food. They would live together. Danny held out his hand. Morgan shook it, this time firmly, without hesitation. Day 28. Day 29. Preparations. 15 of Morgan's fighters arrived at the community. With them, 30 civilians from the school. The total population jumped from 40 to over 100. It's crowded, noisy, lots of mouths, but also lots of hands. Ridge and Tom worked with Morgan's fighters. They set up positions, dug trenches, set traps on the approaches. Danny worked with the rest, expanded the kitchen, installed a second filter, planned storage for the increased number of people. Ji-eun silently laid out new garden beds behind the eastern wall. The leaves of her strange plant went into a bean paste that now fed 100 people. Henry coordinated the resettlement. Ruth treated the sick from the school. The antibiotics did the trick. The 2 who were on the brink of death survived. Day 29. Night. Danny sat by the refrigerator in the store's basement, alone. Midnight. A click. A new can. Golden. Verdant Surge. Voice of persuasion for 24 hours. Danny read the label twice. Voice of persuasion. The ability to speak so that any listener believes you. Not hypnosis, not control, just absolute persuasiveness. Every word sounds right. Every argument hits the mark, as if the best salesman in history had been given the voice of a prophet. Danny held the can in his hands. Tomorrow was the 30th day. Tomorrow the Reaper's men would come, and he would have exactly one chance. He opened the can. He drank. The taste was like honey and thunder, warm and vibrating. He felt something change in his throat, not physically, deeper, as if every word he had ever known had fallen into the right order. Danny returned to the community. He lay down. He didn't sleep. He rehearsed. The 30th day. The morning was gray as always, colder than yesterday. Winter was approaching. The Reaper's men arrived at noon. Not 2, 6. 4 with weapons, 1 in a clean jacket, unarmed, the negotiator, and behind them all, 1 more, large, heavy, with the face of a man accustomed to being feared, not a reaper, but someone important. The negotiator saw the walls, saw Morgan's fighters in their positions, assault rifles, trenches. His face changed. He had expected a small, destitute village, not a fortified settlement with soldiers. Danny stepped out to meet him, alone, unarmed, a smile, professional, that very one, the smile of a salesman who knows he has what the customer needs. The negotiator said that Marcus Holloway was waiting for an answer, half or all. Danny replied, and his voice sounded different, not louder, not harsher, more measured. Every word landed like a stone in a wall, solid, precise, without gaps. He said the community wouldn't give up half, not because it didn't want to, but because there was a better offer. He said his community knew how to make food, not raw materials, food, with flavor, with aroma, with that sensation that the Reaper and his men had forgotten. He said that every week, the community would send the Reaper 30 portions of prepared food, flatbreads, porridge, broth, pasta. This is more valuable than half a load of raw beans, because everyone has raw beans, but no one has cooked food. And he said one last thing, that if the Reaper destroys the community, he'll lose the only source of real food in the sector, forever. The recipes will burn along with the people, and if he spares them, he'll receive every week what no other community can provide. The negotiator listened. His face changed. Skepticism, interest, calculation. The big man stood behind him and listened too. Danny saw him swallow at the word broth. He's hungry. Even the Reaper's people are hungry. Even the army eats gray porridge. The negotiator asked why the Reaper should agree to 30 portions when he could take it all. Danny answered with a single sentence. Because all of that is worth nothing if there's no one to cook it. And 30 portions a week is 1,500 portions a year. Each one costs more than a can of stew. Do the math. The negotiator did the math. Danny saw his lips move. The big guy leaned toward the negotiator, whispered something. The negotiator nodded, said he'd pass it on to the Reaper, that the answer would come in 3 days. But he wanted to try. Danny was ready. He turned and nodded. Ji-eun came out from behind the gate, a wooden tray in her hands. 6 bowls on the tray, porridge with greens, flatbreads, broth, bean paste, and on top of each bowl, a leaf of that strange plant that Ji-eun had grown in the poisoned soil. A green leaf on gray porridge, a bright spot, a visual accent, merchandising, presentation, even in the wastelands. The Reaper's 6 men ate, standing by the gate, in silence. The big one finished first. He looked at his empty bowl, then at Danny, then back at the bowl. The negotiator ate more slowly. When he finished, he wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. He said something the Reaper would hear. They left, with empty bowls. Danny didn't ask for them back. Let them take them. Let the Reaper see the bowls. Let him sniff the leftovers. A presentation doesn't end when the client leaves. A presentation ends when the client thinks of you at home. Evening. Danny was sitting on the roof of the community center. The voice of persuasion was still working. 4 hours until midnight. Morgan climbed up to him, sat down next to him, silently. Then she said she'd never seen 6 armed men defeated by porridge. Danny replied that porridge was the most powerful weapon he knew. Morgan snorted, almost a laugh, the first in a long time judging by how surprised she was by the sound she'd made. Danny looked at the horizon. The glow in the west had faded. The sky was black. But down in the community, a bonfire was burning. And people were sitting around the fire. Over 100 people, eating, talking, laughing. A child ran among the adults. Someone was singing, off-key, but singing. Danny closed his eyes. 30 days ago, he had been sorting energy drink samples in the store's basement. Now he was sitting on a rooftop in a post-nuclear world. He had a refrigerator that granted random superpowers, A community of 100 people, an alliance with the military, a water filter, 200 recipes on paper, a farmer learning hydroponics, a sniper who stayed for the porridge, a month's reprieve from the man who controls the entire sector, and a golden can whose persuasive voice would fade by midnight. The Casio read 11:47 p.m. 13 minutes until the new jar, a new random ability, a new day. Danny opened his eyes. He looked at the community below, at the bonfire, at the people, and he thought that for the first time in a month, he didn't want to know what would be in the jar. Because what he had built in 30 days, he hadn't built with jars. He had built it with his hands, his mind, recipes, words, and porridge. Damn bean porridge with a sprig of greens. 3 days passed in anticipation. Danny didn't sit idle. Every morning he woke up before dawn and went to the fridge. Day 31. A can. Green with a stripe. Verdant Surge. The ability to unerringly guess the sex of kittens. Danny read the label, read it again, looked at the can, looked at the world around him. There were no kittens in the wastelands. There were no cats in the wastelands. He drank the can just so it wouldn't go to waste. He walked around all day feeling like he possessed completely useless knowledge, but built a second stove for the kitchen, with his own hands, without superpowers, from bricks that Ridge had hauled from the ruins. Day 32. A can. Dark green. Verdant Surge. Accelerated wound healing for 24 hours. Danny devoted the day to medicine. Together with Ruth, he went around to all the residents. Those with non-healing wounds, those with abscesses, those with inflammation. Danny touched the wounds. The wounds closed within minutes. Ruth watched in silence. She didn't ask questions. She continued treating them. She had her own explanations for the inexplicable. 23 years in a post-apocalyptic world teach you not to ask unnecessary questions. Day 33. The Reaper's response. It wasn't a negotiator who came. It was a single man, unarmed, young, about 25, clean clothes, clean-shaven. In the wastelands, that was like a gold watch, a sign that you had power behind you. The guy called himself Cole, Marcus Holloway's personal assistant. He said the Reaper accepts the offer, 30 portions of prepared food per week. In exchange, the community receives supplier status. That means the Reaper's other groups won't touch them, as long as the deliveries continue. Cole added one condition. The Reaper wants a cook, in person, for dinner, in 2 weeks. Danny must come to the Reaper's headquarters and cook for him and his men. Danny agreed without hesitation. Cole left. Morgan approached Danny. She said it was a trap, that the Reaper wants to see him up close, to assess him, might capture him, might kill him. Danny replied that he knew, but he couldn't refuse. Refusal would show fear, and fear in negotiations is blood in the water. Morgan said she'd go with him, with 5 fighters. Danny said he'd go alone. Morgan clenched her jaw so hard that the muscles in her cheeks bulged. She said he was an idiot. Danny agreed, but he said that an idiot who cooks good porridge is more valuable alive than dead, and the Reaper understands that. Morgan left without saying goodbye. Tom was standing by the wall and heard everything. He walked over to Danny. For the first time in a month, he spoke more than 2 sentences in a row. He said Morgan was right, that Danny wasn't a fighter, that alone in the Reaper's lair, he was a nobody. Danny replied that he wasn't going to fight. He was going to cook. Tom shook his head and left. Ridge was the last to approach. He didn't say anything. He just put his hand on Danny's shoulder, squeezed, let go, left. It was more than words. 2 weeks until the Reaper's dinner, Danny used every day. The cans were different. The ability to hold one's breath for an hour, useless. The ability to whistle perfectly, useless. But between the jars were days, and Danny filled those days with work. He taught people to cook, not just boil beans, to cook. Ruth learned to make broth from bones and herbs. Ji-yoon mastered drying vegetables on stones. Tom, unexpectedly, turned out to be good at baking. His flatbreads were thicker and coarser than Danny's, but with a special kind of crunch. Danny told him it was a textural contrast. Tom didn't understand the words, but got it with his hands. Morgan kept her distance. She was angry. Danny saw it. He didn't interfere. He waited. On the third day after the argument, she came into the kitchen. She stood in the corner. She watched. On the fourth day, she asked why he was cutting the onion that way and not another. On the fifth day, she cut it herself. Silently, intently, as if she were loading an assault rifle. Precisely and without any unnecessary movements. Danny smirked. Morgan noticed. She asked what was so funny. Danny said she was chopping onions like she was loading a gun. Morgan replied that you had to do things right or not do them at all. Danny nodded. He agreed. The 45th day. Danny went to the fridge before dawn. On his way through the ruined sales floor, he tripped over something in the dark. He fell. He hit his knee. He turned on his phone. 3% battery. Last drops. The beam of light revealed a section of the floor in the darkness. A slab. A ceiling slab that had fallen long ago. A gap beneath it. Danny looked closer. Something glinted under the slab. He pushed the slab aside. Beneath it was a hatch. Not the hatch that led to the basement and the refrigerator. A different one, smaller, hidden. Danny pulled on the handle. It was heavy, rusty. He pulled until it opened. A staircase leading down, narrow, in the wall. He went down. His phone died. 2%, 1%, 0. Darkness. Total darkness. Danny stood in the dark and listened. Silence. A smell. Different. Not the dampness of the basement. Something dry, old, dusty. He climbed back up, went outside, waited. At midnight, he took a can out of the fridge. Turquoise, Verdant Surge, cat's eye, for the second time. Danny smiled. Perfect. He drank it, went down through the hidden hatch, and saw a small room, 2 by 3 meters, concrete walls, a mattress on the floor, decayed, a skeleton on the mattress. Danny stopped. He looked. The skeleton was lying on its side, remnants of fabric on it. An apron, blue, faded. A badge on the apron, plastic, cracked, but legible. Elliot Choi, senior consultant. Danny dropped to his knees. Slowly, he looked at the badge. Elliot Choi, his uncle, disappeared in 2019. Mom cried. Dad searched. The police closed the case a year later. No trace, no body, no explanation. And here he is, here, in a secret room beneath the store where he worked. Some belongings lay next to the skeleton. A notebook, thick. The leather cover was cracked. A pen, dry. A flashlight, dead. And a can, empty. Tin. Verdant Surge. A green leaf on a black background. Danny picked up the notebook. His hands were shaking. He opened it. The handwriting was small, neat. Uncle Elliot always wrote neatly. Mom used to say he had an accountant's handwriting. The first page, the date, November 14th, 2019. An entry. My name is Elliot Choi. I am 34 years old. I am a consultant for the Value Mart supermarket chain in Seattle. Last night, I was testing a new refrigeration unit in the store's basement. It turned on by itself. I walked over. I opened the door. I was sucked inside. I woke up in a ruined store. It's the year 2026. There was a nuclear war. Danny turned the page. Uncle Elliot ended up here 6 years before Danny, in 2026, when the world had just collapsed, when everything was fresh, scary, chaotic. He read on. Elliot found a refrigerator. The very same one, the same hum, the same can at midnight. Elliot described his abilities, day after day, some useful, some absurd. The ability to determine the temperature of water by touch, accurate to the degree. The ability to go 24 hours without blinking. The ability to sense magnetic fields. Elliot was trying to survive, alone, without a community, without people. He wasn't a merchandiser. He was a logistics consultant. He knew numbers but didn't know people. He didn't know how to sell. He couldn't read faces. He couldn't create value out of thin air. He tried to trade directly with banks. He traded his abilities for food. He showed people his superpower. They were afraid. Or they wanted to take the fridge by force. Elliot ran. He hid. He ran again. The entries grew shorter and shorter. The handwriting changed. It trembled. The last pages. The date. March 3rd, 2020. 4 months after arrival. An entry. They know about the fridge. 3, maybe 4. They saw me take the can. They're coming here. I hid in the room under the floor, blocked the hatch. No food, no water. The can is empty today. The fridge didn't give me a new one. I don't know why. Maybe because I'm down here and not up there. Maybe because I'm too far away. Maybe it doesn't count me anymore. Next entry. Different handwriting. Larger. Shakier. March 5th, 2020. 2 days without water. They're upstairs. I hear footsteps. I can't get out. Last entry. March 6th, 2020. 1 word. Too bad. Danny closed the notebook. He sat in the dark next to his uncle's skeleton. He didn't cry. He couldn't. Inside, he felt empty, like a gutted can. He sat there and thought. Elliot died because he was alone, because he showed his strength, because he didn't hide his secret, because he didn't build a circle of people around himself. Danny wouldn't repeat his mistake. He took the notebook. He went upstairs, closed the hatch, put the stove back in place, went outside. Dawn. Gray. Ordinary. The world hadn't changed, but Danny had changed. Now he knew. The fridge doesn't save you. The fridge gives you a chance. And a chance isn't salvation. A chance is an opportunity to die a little later if you're not smart enough to use it right. He returned to the community. He didn't tell anyone anything. He hid the notebook in a secret compartment under his mattress. That evening, he read it over again. He looked for details. He found. Elliot mentioned a company, Verdant Systems. He wrote that he saw the logo on the inside wall of the fridge. Small, engraved. And a serial number. VS-prototype-0047. Day 47. Dinner at the Reapers. Danny had been getting ready since morning. He took a bag of ingredients with him. Beans, flour, salt, dried meat, herbs, greens from Ji-yun, vinegar, a packet of instant coffee, the last of his supply. He'd been saving it for a special occasion. The occasion had arrived. Morgan stood at the gate, arms crossed, her face stony. She said she would send 2 fighters after them, at a distance. Danny didn't argue. Fine. Ridge gave him a knife, a folding one, small. He said it wasn't a weapon. It was a tool, for a cook. Danny took it. He thanked him. Ji-yun was the last to approach. She held out a small bag. Inside were seeds. She said they were seeds from the plant she had grown. Her plant. The only thing that grows in this land. She said that if Danny didn't return, the seeds would be lost. Danny looked at her. She was looking away, but her cheeks had turned red. Danny said he would return, with an empty bag and a full order list. Ji-yun snorted, almost a smile. Danny set off. The Reapers' headquarters was located in a former shopping mall, 6 kilometers to the west. Danny walked for 2 hours. He thought along the way about Uncle Elliot, about his mistakes. Elliot had shown strength. Danny was showing food. Elliot was alone. Danny was surrounded by people. Elliot was hiding. Danny is stepping out to meet them. Different strategies, different results. But the fridge is the same, and the danger is the same. If the Reaper finds out about the fridge, if anyone finds out, it'll end just like it did for Elliot. The shopping center came into view over the hill. Big, 2 stories, partially destroyed but partially restored. The walls are patched with sheets of iron. The windows are boarded up with sacks. Watchtowers on the roof. Lookouts, 3 of them, with binoculars. 2 men with assault rifles at the entrance. 4 more behind the entrance. Danny counted 12 armed men just on the approach. They searched him, took Ridge's knife, let the bag of food through, led them inside. The shopping center was alive inside. That was the first thing that struck Danny. Not ruins, not trash. Life. People were walking through the corridors, light from oil lamps, the smell of food, or rather, the smell of what passed for food here. Gray porridge, boiled beans, something like bread. But also the smell of something else. Alcohol. Moonshine. The Reaper controlled more than just food. He controlled alcohol. And in the Wastelands, alcohol is second only to food. Disinfection, fuel for lamps, currency, and of course, a way to forget. They led Danny down the corridor, past rooms. In one, he saw a storeroom. Sacks, jars, crates, a lot. By Wasteland standards, it was a fortune. By Danny's standards, it was a single shelf in a supermarket. But here, that shelf meant life and death for hundreds of people. They led him into a large hall, a former food court. Tables arranged in rows, chairs. On the wall, a map of the sector, hand-drawn. Danny glanced at it. He memorized it. The map was more detailed than he was. Communities were marked with dots. Red ones under the Reaper's control. Blue ones neutral. Black ones destroyed. His community was marked in green, with a question mark. Interesting. In the center of the hall was a table. A man sat at the table, Marcus Holloway, the Reaper. Danny stopped 10 paces away and watched. 52 years old, heavy-set, not fat, broad, hands like a longshoreman's, a tanned, weather-beaten face with deep creases running from his nose to the corners of his mouth, gray eyes, attentive, not angry. That was the first thing that surprised Danny. Not angry eyes, tired. The Reaper was looking at Danny, silently, assessing, just as he was assessing Danny. A mutual reading. 30 seconds. The Reaper spoke first. Said he'd heard about a cook from a small community, about porridge that still had his people licking their lips. Said he didn't believe it, that porridge is just porridge, that he'd been eating porridge for 23 years and knew its worth. Its worth was 0. Danny smiled. He said the Reaper was right. Porridge is just porridge, but only when it's made by someone who doesn't know how to cook. He asked where the kitchen was. The Reaper nodded toward the door behind him. Danny walked into the kitchen. It was large, a former of the food court. Stoves, pots, everything was rusty but functional. Fire, firewood. Danny laid out the ingredients. He cooked for 3 hours. 3 dishes. Bean porridge with ji-yun herbs and dried meat, simmered over low heat until it reached a creamy texture. Herb-flavored flatbreads, fried until crispy. And coffee, real instant coffee, brewed in a metal mug, hot, black, with a scent that hadn't been in this world for 2 decades. Danny carried the food into the dining area. He set it down in front of the Reaper, not on the table, on a clean cloth he'd brought with him. The bowl in the center, the flatbreads in a semicircle, the coffee mug on the right, a green leaf on the porridge. The Reaper looked at it all in silence. His men stood behind him, 6 of them. They were watching too. Cole, the Reaper's assistant, swallowed. You could hear it. The Reaper picked up a spoon. He tasted the porridge, chewed, slowly, put down the spoon, took a flatbread, dipped it in the porridge, took a bite, chewed, swallowed, took the mug, brought it to his face, inhaled. Steam rose from the coffee in a thin stream. The Reaper closed his eyes. Danny saw his eyelids twitch, a micro-movement, but enough. The Reaper remembered that smell, from another life, from the world before the silence. Coffee in the mornings, an ordinary ritual of an ordinary world. It cost $2, took 5 minutes, meant nothing, until it vanished forever. The Reaper took a sip, set down the mug, opened his eyes, looked at Danny, and Danny saw something on his face he hadn't expected. Not anger, not greed. Pain. Quiet, deep. The pain of a man who remembered that once upon a time, the world was different. The Reaper was silent for 10 seconds. Then he said 2 words. More coffee. Danny shook his head, said that was the last one, but there would be more next week, if the Reaper had something to trade. The Reaper looked at him, smiled, for the first time all evening, said that Danny was either the bravest man in the Wastelands or the dumbest. He comes alone, unarmed, cooks a meal, and then bargains. Danny replied that he wasn't brave or dumb. He was a salesman, and a salesman goes where the buyer is. The Reaper laughed, briefly, like a bark. Then he fell silent, a serious face. He said he liked the food, but food doesn't change the rules. His sector, his law, half from everyone. That's the foundation. If you make an exception for one community, the rest will want the same, and the foundation will crumble. Danny said he understood, and that he wasn't asking for an exception. He was asking for a different status, not a tributary, a supplier. Danny's community supplies the Reaper not with raw food, but with prepared meals, with recipes, with skills, things you can't find anywhere else. In return, the Reaper provides security and access to the caravan routes. Not charity, a partnership. Both sides get what they didn't have before. The Reaper listened. Cole took notes behind him. The Reaper thought. A minute. 2. Then he said he'd think it over, and that Danny could go. Alive. Danny stood up. He bowed. Not deeply, politely, like at a business meeting. He turned and headed for the exit. Halfway there, the Reaper called out to him. Danny stopped. The Reaper said he had a question. Where from? Where did a guy from nowhere get knowledge that no one else in the Wastelands has? Recipes, filters, logistics. Who taught him? Danny turned around. He looked Reaper in the eye. He said that the world they had all forgotten had taught him, and that he had come to remind them. Reaper didn't answer. Danny walked out. It was dark outside. 2 Morgan fighters were waiting in the ruins across the street. He walked toward them. His legs were shaking. His hands were shaking. His whole body was... The adrenaline had worn off. 3 hours in the lair of the man who controlled the entire sector. 3 hours hanging by a thread. But he had made it out, alive, with an offer on the table, and with an empty coffee mug that the Reaper hadn't returned. 3 weeks had passed since the dinner at the Reaper's. The community was growing. The 52nd day since Danny's arrival. The population was already 120 people. Families had arrived from the destroyed community of Birchwood. 18 people, hungry, frightened, with a single bag of belongings to share. Reaper's men had burned down their greenhouse before the deal with Danny. They hated Reaper. They feared him. Danny took them in, fed them, gave them a place to stay. Not right away. First, he listened to each one, separately, found out what each could do. Among them was a woman, Sadie Brooks, 26 years old, a former nurse, short hair, thin, tired eyes, very tired. The eyes of someone who had seen too much and slept too little. Ruth brought her to Danny. She said that Sadie knew medicine better than anyone in the sector, that she treated patients without anesthesia. She stitched up wounds with fishing line. She set bones with sticks. And not once in 5 years had she lost a patient through her own fault, only when there were no medicines. and there were almost never any medicines. Danny looked at Sadie, 30 seconds, reading her. She was closed off, walls higher than Morgan's, body tense, hands in her pockets, chin down, not out of weakness, out of habit of not looking people in the eye. Because hope shows in the eyes, and hope in the wastelands kills faster than a bullet. Danny didn't offer her a job. He didn't talk about medicine. He didn't ask about her past. He asked one thing. He asked when she last had coffee. Sadie lifted her head. She looked at him, the first direct gaze. There was surprise in it, and something else, the shadow of long buried. She said 5 years ago, maybe 6. She doesn't remember. Danny nodded, said her tent was the third on the left, that Ruth would show her, and he left. That evening, he haggled with the caravan for a can of instant Nescafe. He traded 5 portions of bean paste and a recipe for flatbreads written on paper. The caravan driver haggled for 20 minutes. Danny didn't give in. The coffee was worth it. That night, he brewed a mug, hot, black. He brought it to Sadie's tent, set it by the entrance, left. Didn't knock. He didn't call out. He just left it there. In the morning, the mug was empty. Clean. Washed. Next to it was a small pebble. Smooth. Round. As if someone had placed it there on purpose. Danny picked up the pebble. Put it in his pocket. Said nothing. 3 days later, Sadie came to him on her own. Said she was ready to work. That she needed a room. Clean. A table. Light. Water. Tools. Danny gave her everything he could. He set aside a room in the sturdiest house. Tom and Ridge hauled out the trash. Ji-yoon brought bandages. Morgan gave her 2 oil lamps. Henry lent her his reading glasses for when she examined patients. Sadie set up the medical station in 2 days. In the very first week, she treated 12 patients. She reset a soldier's shoulder. She cured a child's skin infection. She lanced an abscess on an old man. All without anesthesia. Silently. Methodically. Her hands moved precisely and quickly, like a surgeon's. Danny watched. Not her hands. Her eyes. Her eyes were still tired, but something had appeared in them. Focus. Purpose. A person without a purpose dies quickly. A person with a purpose can go on forever. Sadie had found a purpose. Again. The 58th day. Danny received a reply from the Reaper. Cole came in person, said that Marcus Holloway accepts the partnership offer, supplier status, weekly deliveries of prepared meals, in exchange for security and access to the caravan routes. One additional condition, the Reaper wants coffee every week for himself personally. Danny said the coffee would be provided. Cole left. Morgan approached. She asked where Danny was going to get coffee every week. Danny said he'd find a way. Morgan asked how. Danny said that was his problem. Morgan clenched her jaw. She left. Danny stood there thinking. Coffee. A problem. Caravans rarely brought it. The price was rising. The world's supplies are finite. He needed another way. He went to Ji-yoon. He found her in the garden beds behind the eastern wall. She was kneeling in the dirt. Her hands were elbow deep in the soil. Around her were rows of that same plant with green leaves. And something else. Something new. Small shoots. Pale. Thin. Ji-yoon didn't look up when he approached. She just said she knew it was him, by his footsteps. Danny down beside her. He asked what was growing. Ji-yoon said she didn't know, that she'd found seeds in a crack in the concrete wall, that she'd planted them, that it was growing. All she did was plant and see what survived. 90% died. 10% survived. From those 10%, she selected the seeds and planted them again. And again. And again. 3 years in a row. Danny looked at her garden beds. Small. Pitiful by the standards of the world he remembered. but alive, green. Amid the grayness of the wastelands, these beds were like windows into another world. He asked if it was possible to grow coffee. Jiun looked at him for the first time during the conversation. She said that coffee trees grow in the tropics. They need temperatures between 20 and 30 degrees, humidity, shade, acidic soil. None of that exists here. Danny said, "What if we build a greenhouse?" Jiun fell silent. She thought. She said that a greenhouse is made of glass. There is no glass. Or plastic sheeting. There is no plastic sheeting. Or something transparent. Danny remembered, from his uncle's diary, from his own notes, from what he'd seen in the warehouses. A roll of tarpaulin, the one he'd hidden on the first day. Not transparent, but... He remembered something else. In the Reaper's warehouse, in the hallway, he'd caught a glimpse of a roll of something transparent. Polyethylene. Construction grade. Perfect for greenhouses. Danny said he'd get the plastic. Jiun looked at him for a long time, not suspiciously, with curiosity. She said that if there was plastic sheeting and a warm enough spot, she'd give it a try. Not coffee. Coffee requires seeds, which they don't have. But tomatoes, maybe, or peppers, or that used to grow here, if they could find seeds. Danny smiled. He said he'd find some. June went back to the garden beds. Danny sat nearby, in silence, for a minute, 2. Then he stood up and walked away. On the way, he turned around. June was kneeling in the dirt, her hands in the soil. The sun broke through the dust for a second, a single ray, golden. It fell on her back, on her hands in the soil, on the green leaves all around. And Danny thought that this was the most beautiful thing he had seen since arriving in this world. Not because June was beautiful, although she was, but because a person on her knees in dead soil, making life grow from it, is the most beautiful thing there can be in a world that has died. The 60th day, 2 months. Danny sat on the roof that evening and counted. 120 people, water, food, the infirmary, walls, fighters, a trade deal with the Reaper, caravan connections, recipes, garden beds. The community was no longer a target. The community was a structure. Small, fragile, but a structure. Henry sat down beside him, silently. They sat and looked at the horizon. Henry asked what Danny was going to call this place. Danny didn't understand. Henry explained. The community had grown. Communities need names. The vagrant camp in the south is called Dry Bones. Morgan's community was called Fort School. They need a name. Danny thought. Old Haven. The Old Haven. The name they gave this place, after the silence. But that's a name from the past. A name of ruins. He needs a name for the future. He said, Haven. Just Haven. A refuge. Without the old. Henry nodded, said it was a good name. Simple, understandable. One that people would remember and follow. Danny looked down at the community below, at the lights, at the people around the fire, at the children running and laughing, at Sadie, sitting by the infirmary with a mug in her hands, at Ji-yoon, returning from the garden beds with dirt on her knees, at Ridge, cleaning his weapon by the gate, at Tom, carrying firewood. The 3rd month. Haven was being built. Every day, every hour, Danny didn't stop. Day 65. The can. Pink. Verdant Surge. Thermal vision for 24 hours. Danny used it at night. He walked the perimeter of Haven, checked every meter of the wall, found 3 weak spots where heat was escaping. That meant gaps, cracks in the walls, through which heat would escape in winter, through which death would come in winter. He marked the spots. In the morning, Tom and Ridge patched them up. Day 68. The stacks. For the first time, not an army, not a squad, one man. He appeared at the gate at dawn. He stood motionless. He waited. The sentry woke Morgan. Morgan woke Danny. They went out together. The man at the gate was terrifying. Not because of his wounds, not because of his weapons, because of his skin. The skin was shiny, smooth, like melted plastic, traces of radiation, not burns, something else. As if the skin had been remelted and poured back over the bones. His eyes were light, almost white. The pupils were tiny. He stood there and looked at Danny, silently, for a minute, 2. Then he spoke. His voice was quiet, even, like static. He said his name was Shard, that he had come from the Assembly. The Assembly is the Council of the Glass People, cultists from the radioactive wastelands to the east. He said the Assembly had heard of Haven, of a man who performs miracles, who feeds people out of nothing, who sees in the dark and talks to birds. Danny went cold. They knew. Not everything, but they knew more than they should. Shard said the Assembly wanted to know. Danny, from which source? Danny asked what a source was. Shard said the glass people believed in sources, places of power, left to the world before the silence, which give gifts to those who find them. But gifts come at a price, and the price is always the same. Silence will come for the gifts, sooner or later. The glass believe that every source brings the end closer, that the world must fall silent, that silence is not the end, but the beginning, that people are in the way, that the gifts get in the way, that whoever uses a gift must be returned to the silence. Danny listened, his face unmoving, a storm raging inside. They know about the refrigerators, not his specifically, but the phenomenon, about the sources. They've seen others, or heard of them. Shard said the Assembly is giving Danny a choice, to come to them, voluntarily, to surrender his gift and find peace. Or the Assembly will come for him, and there will be no peace. Morgan stepped forward, hand on her gun. Danny stopped her with a gesture, looked at the Shard, said he was grateful for the warning, that he would think it over, that he was asking the Assembly to give him time. The Shard tilted his head, like a bird, said that time was the last thing the world had left, and that there wasn't much of it, turned and walked away, disappeared into the morning mist, as if he had never been there. Morgan turned to Danny, fire in her eyes. She asked what the source was, what the gift was, what he was talking about. Danny said the glass people were crazy, that they saw signs in everything, that someone had told them about clean water and ready-made food, and they'd decided it was magic. Morgan looked at him. She didn't believe him. Danny could tell. But she didn't press him. Not yet. She went back to her people. Danny stood at the gate, alone. The wind blew from the east, from the wasteland, from the place where the glass people lived. The wind smelled of metal and smoke. They'll come. The question is when. The 70th day, Danny started keeping a diary, like Uncle Elliot, but not about abilities, about people. He wrote everything down, who could do what, who loved whom, who hated whom, who was afraid of winter, who was afraid of the reaper, who was afraid of the glass people, who was afraid of nothing. There were 2 of the latter, Ridge and Maya. Maya appeared on the 72nd day, riding a motorcycle, or rather on what used to be a motorcycle. Now it was the skeleton of a machine with a generator motor strapped to the frame and wheels from a cart. But it ran, and Maya rode it as if it were a brand new Harley. 24 years old, tattoos on both arms from wrists to shoulders, a short haircut, a gold tooth, the upper right one, a thick leather jacket with rivets, 2 knives and a sawed-off shotgun on her belt, a crossbow with homemade bolts on her back. She rode through the gates of Haven without asking permission. She stopped in the middle of the square. She turned off the engine, got out, looked around. Morgan's fighters raised their weapons. Maya paid no attention. She walked over to the fire, took a bowl with the remains of the morning porridge, sniffed it. She tasted it. She finished it. She set the bowl down. She turned to the people. She said she'd been told they fed people here. Morgan stepped forward. She asked who she was. Maya introduced herself. She said she used to be in the Razors gang. She was. The gang is dead. Everyone is dead. The glass killed them. 3 weeks ago, a nighttime attack. Dozens of them, with burning sticks and axes. A gang of 12 people. Maya was the only one who survived. Because she kept shooting until she ran out of bullets. Then she kept slashing until she ran out of strength. Then she ran. 3 weeks alone, on a motorcycle. No food, no people, no words. She was skinny. Under her leather jacket, her ribs stuck out like piano keys. Her eyes were sunken, but they burned with rage and hunger, not just physical hunger. Danny walked up to her. He looked. 30 seconds. Maya Reyes. A weapon, not a person. That's how she saw herself. 3 years alone in a gang where the weak weren't kept. Then 3 weeks alone in the Wastelands, where no one was kept. She had forgotten how to be anything but a weapon. She'd forgotten how to speak without giving orders. She'd forgotten how to sit without her back to the wall. Danny said she needed a reconnaissance commander. That Haven had fighters but no eyes on the outside. That Maya knew the Wastelands better than any of them because she'd lived in them, not behind walls. Maya looked at him. From the bottom up, she wasn't tall, but her gaze was like a punch. She asked what she would get. Danny said a roof, food, people, a place. Maya smirked. She said she didn't need people. Danny replied that she did. She'd just forgotten. Maya didn't answer. They gave her a tent, a separate one, on the edge of the camp. She wanted to be as far away from everyone as possible. That very first evening, Danny set a bowl of hot ramen by the entrance. Or rather, what he called ramen. Broth made from dried meat, hand-cut flour noodles, seasoned with salt and whatever spicy something that Jiyeon had found among her experimental plants. Hot, steaming, spicy. He set it down and left. Half an hour later, a sound came from Maya's tent. Not a scream, not a word, a sound. As if someone had wanted to say something and couldn't. In the morning, the bowl was empty, washed to a shine. Maya didn't say a word to Danny, but she stayed. On the third day, she came out with a sawed-off shotgun. She told Morgan she was taking 2 fighters and going on a reconnaissance mission. By evening, she returned with a map of the surrounding area covering 20 kilometers, drawn from memory, accurate, detailed. Morgan looked at the map, at Maya, at Danny. She shook her head. She said quietly that Danny gathered people the way others gathered ammunition. Danny replied that people were better than ammunition. Ammunition runs out. People bring other people. The 75th day. Haven's population was 150 people. Caravans began arriving more often. Word spread across the wastelands. There was a place where they fed you, where they treated you, where walls stood, where a cook out of nowhere made something resembling real food out of beans. People came, in families, in pairs, alone. Danny took everyone in, but not just like that. Every new resident had to talk to him. 30 seconds of reading, then a question. What can you do? Not what you were. What can you do? A carpenter got tools. A seamstress got needles. A hunter got a spot in Maya's squad. A teacher. One woman said she had been a teacher. Lily Carter, 31 years old, red hair down to her waist, braided into a plait, glasses, a soft voice. Hands accustomed to holding chalk, not weapons. She came alone, with a bag containing books. 3 books. Worn. Worn from reading. Biology, a 6th grade textbook. Math, an 8th grade textbook. and a collection of poems. Danny looked at the books, at Lily, at her hands, which stroked the covers the way others stroke children. He asked if she had children. Lily fell silent. For a long time. Then she said she had. A son, 5 years old. He died the first winter after the silence. She was an elementary school teacher when it all happened. 23 years ago. She was 8. She was a student. Then she became a teacher for those who remained. Then she was left alone. Then she walked. For a long time, until she heard about Haven. Danny didn't say anything about her son. He didn't offer condolences. He didn't offer comfort. He said one thing. He said there were 23 children in Haven, and not a single teacher. Lily lifted her head. Her glasses glinted. Something flashed in her eyes, a spark, small but alive. She said she needed a room, a blackboard, chalk. Lily got everything in 2 days. Danny traded for chalk from the caravan, real chalk, white, in chunks. The caravan driver didn't understand why anyone would want chalk. Danny gave him 3 flatbreads for it. Deal of the year. They nailed the blackboard together from fence boards. Tom brought them. Ridge hung it up. The room was small, a former storage room, but clean, bright, with a window. Lily walked in, stood in front of the blackboard, picked up the chalk, and wrote. Today is the first lesson. 23 children sat on the floor, on blankets, with eyes as big as saucers. They didn't know what school was, didn't know what a lesson was. They didn't know what a teacher was. Lily smiled, for the first time in a very long time. Danny stood in the doorway and watched. Lily was telling the children what letters were, what numbers were, what the world was. The children listened, with their mouths open. One boy asked if it was true that water used to be clear. Lily said it was true. The boy asked if it tasted good. Lily said it did, very much so. The boy said he wanted to try some. Lily looked at Danny. Danny went out. He came back 10 minutes later with a mug. Filtered water. Clean. Clear. He set it down in front of the boy. The boy drank in small sips, slowly, as if tasting every drop. He set the mug down, smiled, said it was delicious, just like the teacher said. Lily took off her glasses, wiped them, put them back on. Her lips were trembling, but she didn't cry. Teachers don't cry in front of their students. Danny quietly closed the door. He stood in the hallway. The 80th day. Haven ceased to be a community. Haven became a town, a small one, a dirty one, with patched walls and tarpaulin roofs. But a town, 200 people, 4 main buildings, the residential block, Sadie's infirmary, Lily's school, the kitchen everyone called Danny's restaurant, even though Danny had asked them not to. Henry had become something of a mayor or a town clerk. He kept records, counted people, assigned housing. He kept order. Henry had been a lawyer in his previous life. Not a trial lawyer, as Danny had first thought. A municipal lawyer. He knew how the rules worked, how the laws worked, how the system worked, and now he was building a system for Haven. A simple one. Every adult works. Everyone has a task. Everyone has a vote at the meeting. Meetings once a week. Everyone comes. Everyone speaks. Danny proposed. Henry formalized it. Morgan ensured security. Ridge trained the militia. Tom cooked. Ji-yoon grew food. Sadie healed. Lily taught. Maya scouted. Everyone in their place, like goods on a shelf. Danny smiled at the thought. Haven's floor plan. Every element in the right place for maximum efficiency. Day 85. A problem. Henry came to see Danny in the morning. His face was gray. He said that at the meeting last night, a group of 12 people demanded transparency. They want to know where Danny gets his resources, where the recipes come from, where the knowledge comes from. They saw him leaving for the store at night, returning with things, that sometimes he can do things an ordinary person cannot. They don't say magic, they say secret. And secrets in the Wastelands are dangerous. The group's leader, a man named Press, 40 years old, from Birchwood, a former lawyer, a real one this time. Smart, sharp, with a tongue like a razor. Press isn't the enemy. Press wants safety for his family. And safety for Press means information, control, knowing what's going on. Because in Birchwood, he didn't know, and Birchwood burned down. Danny understood. He wasn't angry at Press, but the problem was real. Danny asked Henry to set up a meeting, with Press, one-on-one. Henry set it up, in the evening, in Henry's office. A desk, 2 chairs, a lamp. Press walked in, sat down, back straight, hands on the desk, an open posture, professional, lawyer-like. "I'm here to get answers." Danny sat across from him, looked at him. 30 seconds. Press was smarter than most, more observant, more methodical. He kept notes. Danny saw the notebook in his pocket. Press was writing down anomalies. Danny's evening disappearances, unexplained skills, superhuman strength one day, normal one day, another the next. Abilities that appeared and disappeared. Press wasn't a fool. He was piecing together a pattern, and the pattern showed that Danny was hiding the source of his power. Danny asked what exactly Press wanted to know. Press said everything. Danny was silent. Then he said the following. Yes, he has a secret. No, he couldn't reveal it. Not because he didn't trust Press, but because revealing the secret would destroy Haven. Not figuratively, literally. If certain people outside Haven found out what Danny was hiding, they would come, and not the Reaper. Worse. Press narrowed his eyes. He asked how Danny knew. Danny said he knew because there was another one before him. Who revealed it? Who died? Press was silent. He asked what Danny wanted from him. Danny said trust, for a time. Not blind trust, justified trust. He said that Press was a lawyer, that a lawyer understands the concept of conditional trust. You trust as long as the outcome is positive. If the outcome turns negative, the trust is revoked. Haven is growing. People are fed. Children are learning. The sick are being treated. The walls are standing. That's a positive result. As long as it's positive, Danny asks not to dig. When it turns negative, Danny will tell everything himself. Press thought. A minute. 2. Then he said that wasn't an answer. It was a reprieve. Danny agreed. He said yes, a reprieve. But in this world, a reprieve is the best you can get. Press stood up. He said he'd give Danny 3 months. If Haven is okay in 3 months, he'll keep quiet. If not, he'll demand answers publicly, at a meeting, in front of everyone. Danny agreed. Press left. Danny stayed. He sat in silence. 3 months. Another deadline. Another timer. This world ran on deadlines. The Reaper in a month. The Glass ones, who knows when. Press in 3 months. Winter in 2. All the clocks were ticking at once. Day 90. 3 months since arrival. Danny stood in Haven Square. Square, that's a stretch. A cleared space between 4 buildings. Trampled earth, a couple of wooden benches, a flagpole, a flag sewn by one of the women, blue fabric, a white letter H, Haven. Danny looked at the flag and thought that 3 months ago there had been nothing here but dust, and nothing else. And now a flag, a school, a hospital, a kitchen, 200 people, a flag. Funny, absurd, beautiful. The 90th day was also the day Danny found Elliot's diary in the basement, or rather reread it for the 3rd time. He was looking for details he'd missed, and he found them, between the pages, a slip of paper, thin, transparent, almost invisible. On the sheet was a diagram, small, precise, drawn with a fine pen. A refrigerator, rear view, a panel, connectors on the panel, and labels. Diagnostic port, network sync. Emergency override. Danny looked at the diagram. The refrigerator had ports for connection, for diagnostics, for syncing with the network, for emergency shutdown. This isn't magic. It's technology. Verdant Systems Corporation created this as a device, with instructions, with tech support, with a serial number. It was supposed to work in a network with others just like it. Synchronization. A network of refrigerators, interconnected. Danny ran to the basement, to the refrigerator, walked around it, the back panel. Dust, cobwebs. He wiped it with his hand and saw it. A panel, small, 5 centimeters by 10, 3 ports, and a logo, a green leaf. Verdant Systems. Under the logo, a serial number, VS-P-0047. 47, just like in the diary. Danny ran his finger over the ports. Cold, metal, some standard he didn't recognize, not USB, not lightning, something else. He pressed his finger against the panel. Nothing. Pressed harder. A click. The panel opened. Beneath it, a screen. Tiny. 2 by 3 centimeters. The screen lit up. Green text on a black background. VS-P-0047. Status. Active. Network. Disconnected. Units detected 0/200. Last sync error. Time anchor locked. Current user D. Chue. Previous user E. Chue. Deceased. Danny read. He reread. Units detected 0/200. 0 out of 200. The network isn't working. But 200 units, 200 refrigerators, across the world, or across the country, or across the continent. 200. Time anchor locked. The time anchor was locked. That explained the transfer. The refrigerator was tied to a point in time, the past, and transported the user into the future, at the moment when the world is broken. Current user D. Chue. It knew his name, knew that Elliot was dead. This isn't just a machine, it's a system, with memory, with logic, with an interface. Someone created it, someone programmed it. Someone in 2024, in a Verdant Systems lab, decided the world needed 200 devices that transport people through time and grant random superpowers via energy drinks. Danny closed the panel. He stood up. He stood in the basement next to a humming refrigerator, and he thought. 200 refrigerators, 200 potential users, if at least 10 of them are active. 10 people with random superpowers in a post-nuclear war world. Who are they? Where are they? What are they doing with their gifts? He recalled Shard's words. The sources. The glass ones knew. Not about refrigerators specifically, but about places of power. So they'd seen others, or the aftermath of their presence. And somewhere in the South, according to rumors from Elliot's diary, someone had already used theirs. Danny came out of the basement. Dawn. A gray sky. Haven was waking up below. Smoke from the chimneys. Voices. Children's laughter from Lily's school. The smell of porridge from the kitchen where Tom was stoking the fire. The sound of a hammer. Ridge was repairing the wall. A typical morning. In a typical town, in an unusual world. Danny stood in the doorway of the ruined supermarket, his store, his world, and his new world. And he thought that somewhere far away, someone else was standing by their refrigerator, and that this someone might be a friend or an enemy, and that sooner or later their paths would cross. Because 200 refrigerators is no accident. It's a plan, and a plan always has an author, and the author always wants a result. The 4th month. Winter had come. It didn't creep up. It didn't set in gradually. It crashed down. The sky turned black overnight, not gray as usual. Black. Dust completely blocked out the sun. The temperature dropped by 20 degrees in 3 days. On the morning of the 95th day, Danny went out into the square and saw frost on the walls. White, fragile, beautiful, and deadly. Black winter. the third in a row. The old-timers said the first one lasted 3 months, the second 3.5, the third might last 4. 4 months without the sun, without heat, without the ability to grow anything in open ground. Danny called a meeting. Henry, Morgan, Ridge, Tom, Sadie, Jiyun, Lily, Maya, Press. 9 people at the table, 200 outside the walls. He laid out the records, supplies, food for 6 weeks at the current ration. Water from the stream is still flowing, but if it freezes to a depth of a meter, it will stop. Firewood for 3 weeks. Medicines for 2 months, barring an epidemic. Warm clothing for half the population. Morgan said they needed to cut rations. Danny shook his head. He said cutting rations would kill morale faster than hunger would kill bodies. People came to Haven because they're fed here. If they stop feeding them properly, they'll leave. Or they'll riot. Press nodded. For the first time, he agreed with Dan openly. He said Danny was right, that the riot in Birchwood started precisely after rations were cut. People can endure the cold. People can endure fear. People cannot endure having what they're used to taken away. Danny said we shouldn't cut back, but expand. Everyone looked at him. He explained, the Reaper has 4 warehouses, 2 in the west, 1 in the south, 1 in the center of Old Haven. These warehouses hold pre-war supplies, canned goods, grains, powdered milk, salt, butter. The Reaper uses them to pay the army. But in winter, the caravans come to a standstill. The roads are impassable. The warehouses are cut off. Security is reduced because some of the Reaper's fighters have scattered to warm shelters. Danny suggested not stealing, not looting, trading. In winter, the value of ready-to-eat hot food increases tenfold. A can of stew costs twice as much in the cold, but a bowl of hot soup in the frost costs 3 times as much as a can, because the can needs to be opened. It needs to be heated. You need a fire. You need water. The soup is already ready, hot, right now, at the very moment a person is freezing. Context, scarcity, timing, merchandising in its purest form. He suggested opening a winter trading post halfway between Haven and the Reaper's headquarters. A tent with a canopy, a campfire, hot food, exchange. Caravanners stranded on the room will pass by. Reaper fighters on patrol will pass by. Stray travelers will pass by. And everyone will get hot soup in exchange for something useful. Canned goods, tools, clothing, information. Morgan said it was dangerous. A tent outside the walls is a target. Danny said that Maya and 2 fighters would provide cover. Not inside the tent, outside, invisible. Anyone who tries to get in will get a bolt from Maya's crossbow before they even realize what happened. Maya smiled. For the first time, in front of everyone, her gold tooth glinted. She said she liked the plan. The council voted. 7 in favor, 2 abstained. Henry and Press. Henry because he was cautious. Press because, as a matter of principle, he abstained from anything he didn't fully understand. The next day, Danny, Tom, and 2 of Morgan's fighters set up a tent 3 kilometers from Haven, at the intersection of 2 roads, a strategic point. Everyone traveling from west to east or from north to south passed through here. Danny hung a piece of cloth over the tent. He wrote a single word on it with charcoal. Hot. On the first day, 3 people came. Vagrants, hungry, frozen. Danny gave them soup, for free. They ate standing up, burning their hands on the bowls. One was crying. Danny asked what they could give in return. One said nothing. Danny said that information is currency too. Where they'd seen the Reaper's people, where they'd seen the glass ones, what they'd heard. The vagrants told him. The Reaper had cut back on patrols. 2 of the 4 warehouses were closed for the winter. Only the central and southern ones were operating. The glass ones had gone deeper east. They were wintering in caves, but they'd posted lookouts at the border, watching. Danny memorized it. Feed. He let them go. A week later, 10 people a day were coming to the tent. Word got around. They're feeding people at the crossroads, hot food, in exchange for information or any useful item. Danny traded soup for anything: nails, wire, fabric, candles. Once, someone brought a bag of seeds, real ones, not hybrid, tomatoes. Danny traded a 3-day supply of soup for them and didn't regret it. He took the seeds to Ji-yoon. She held the little bag with both hands, just like Ruth used to hold the antibiotics. She said that if we built a greenhouse by spring, then maybe, 1 chance in 10, but maybe. Danny said that 1 in 10 is infinitely better than 0 in 10. Ji-yoon looked at him. She smiled for the first time. Not widely, just the corner of her mouth, but she smiled. Danny remembered. The 100th day. Morgan brought news. Bad news. Maya's scouts spotted movement to the south. Not the glass ones. Not the Reaper's people. Others. A group of 30 people. Armed. Organized. Heading toward Haven. Not on the road. Through the wastelands. Bypassing the lookouts. Maya had been tracking them for 2 days. She said they weren't bandits. Bandits don't march in formation. They're soldiers. Or used to be soldiers. Danny called an emergency council meeting. Ridge said it was a test. Someone sent out a reconnaissance force to see how Haven would react. Morgan agreed. She said that if they were professionals, they wouldn't launch an assault. Too few for an assault on a fortified city. 30 men against 200 behind the walls is suicide. But if it's a reconnaissance mission, then someone big is behind them. Someone they don't know yet. Danny thought about the 200 refrigerators, about the fact that somewhere in the south, someone is using theirs. About the King of Thirst, a name he'd heard from a caravan driver a month ago. A whisper, a rumor. In the south of the continent, there is a man who controls the water. All the water. Every well, every stream, every river. His name is the King of Thirst, and he has a power that is no accident, that never changes, that always works. Danny didn't tell the council about this, not yet. Right now, they had to deal with the problem of 30 armed men, 3 days' journey from Haven. Ridge suggested an ambush. Morgan suggested fortifying the perimeter. Maya suggested intercepting them. Danny suggested feeding them. Everyone looked at him. Danny explained. 30 soldiers in the wastelands, in winter, hungry, frozen, far from base. They're heading for Haven because they've heard there's food here, maybe on orders, maybe on their own initiative. It doesn't matter. What matters is that they're hungry. And a hungry soldier who gets hot soup stops being a threat and becomes an opportunity. Morgan said that was madness. Danny said that madness is killing people who could become allies. Morgan said that Danny isn't a soldier and doesn't understand. Danny replied that he's a salesman, and that a salesman understands one thing that a soldier often doesn't see. An enemy is a customer who hasn't been made the right offer yet. Morgan fell silent. Ridge snorted, but he didn't object. They reached a compromise. Maya, with 5 fighters, came out to meet them. Not to fight, to make contact. With a white flag and a cart of hot soup. Danny went with them. Morgan tried to stop him. Danny said that soup without a presentation is just soup, but soup with the right presentation is diplomacy. They met the group on the 2nd day, in a ravine between 2 hills. 32 people. Not 30. Maya was off by 2. Armed, tired, hungry. Their commander, a woman, tall, lean, with short gray hair, though she was no older than 40. She called herself Colonel Grant, former military, National Guard, a unit that had tried to maintain order after the silence. Then order ended. The unit fell apart. Grant and her people had been wandering the wastelands for 2 years, looking for a place. They didn't find it. They heard about Haven. They came to check it out, not on anyone's orders, on their own initiative. Danny rolled out the cart. He opened the lid. Steam rose up. The smell of hot broth wafted through the clearing. 32 faces turned toward the cart. 32 hungry faces. Grant looked at Danny, at the cart. Day 120, midwinter, the darkest time. The sun hadn't broken through in 40 days. The temperature dropped below -20 at night. During the day, it rose to -10. People didn't leave the buildings unless absolutely necessary. The stream had frozen over. Tom and Ridge chiseled through the ice every morning to get to the water. The filter was working more slowly. Water came out drop by drop. Food was running out. The store at the intersection was open every other day, then every 2 days. Then it closed. It was too cold. The caravans had come to a complete standstill. No one traveled through the wastelands in such freezing weather. Even Maya had cut her scouting trips down to a minimum. One outing every 3 days. And every time she returned, she was blue from the cold with frostbitten fingers. Sadie treated her hands in silence. She smeared something from her supplies on them. She bandaged them. Maya didn't thank her. Sadie didn't expect it. Danny went to the fridge every night. The jars fell out. The ability to feel no cold. He devoted that day to working outside, hauling firewood, repairing walls, checking the pipes. 24 hours without feeling the frost. The ability of accelerated metabolism. Useless. He was twice as hungry as usual and ate a double portion he couldn't afford. The ability to see heat currents. Useful. He found a spot where a warm air duct ran underground, a remnant of the mall's old heating system. The pipe ran from the store to the residential quarter. If they cleared it out and connected it to the furnace, they could heat 2 of the 4 buildings. Ridge and Grant worked for 2 days straight. They cleared it. They connected it. It got 5 degrees warmer in 2 buildings. The difference between life and death for the elderly and children. Day 130. Crisis. We're out of food. Not quite. We have beans left. 3 bags. For 230 people, that's 4 days. Maybe 5 if we stretch it. Danny stood in the kitchen and looked at the 3 sacks. Tom stood nearby. He was silent. They both understood. Henry came in. He took off his glasses. He didn't wipe them. He just held them in his hands. He said there would be panic at the meeting, that press was already saying they needed to leave, that Haven was doomed, that winter would kill everyone. Danny said press was wrong. Henry asked why. Danny paused. Then he said he needed 3 days. 3 days and he'd solve the problem. Henry put on his glasses. He looked at Danny. For a long time. He said he believed him. But that faith doesn't put food on the table. Danny nodded. He left. He went to the fridge. Midnight. A can. White with a gold stripe. Verdant Surge. Short-range telekinesis for 24 hours. Danny looked at the label. He read it again. Telekinesis. The ability to move objects with the power of thought. Short range. Up to 10 meters. Not the most powerful, but, he thought, an hour. 2. He sat in the basement next to the fridge and thought. Telekinesis. What could be done with telekinesis in 24 hours to feed 230 people? The answer came at 3 in the morning. Fish. The stream was frozen over, but water was flowing beneath the ice, and in the water, perhaps, fish. If they had survived, if the radiation hadn't killed everything. Danny went out to the stream at dawn. The ice was half a meter thick. He raised his hand. He concentrated. He felt a force, a strange sensation, like an invisible hand growing out of his palm. He directed it at the ice. A crack. Another one. A chunk of ice the size of a tabletop rose into the air and flew off to the side. Black water below. Movement. Danny bent down. A silvery body flashed in the water. A fish. Small. The size of his palm. But a fish. Alive. He raised his hand again. Telekinesis. The water rippled. The fish rose into the air along with the stream of water and fell onto the ice. It thrashed. Danny picked it up. Cold, slippery, real. In 6 hours, he had caught 134 fish. His hands trembled with tension. His head ached. Telekinesis drained his strength. Every time it was like lifting an invisible weight. But 134 fish. He carried them to Haven in bags. 2 sacks, heavy, smelly, wonderful. Tom saw them first. He dropped the log he was carrying. He stood and looked at the sacks, then at Danny, then back at the sacks. He asked how. Danny said he'd found a weir, that the stream hadn't frozen to the bottom, that there were fish, lots of them. Tom didn't believe it. But the fish was real, and real fish is more important than a truth. That evening, Haven ate fish soup, hot, rich, with leftover beans and greens from Ji-yun, who had saved her greenhouse supplies just for a moment like this. 230 people ate in silence because of the fish, real fish, for the first time for many, for the first time in 23 years for some. A child asked his mother what it tasted like. The mother said it was fish. The child asked what fish was. The mother couldn't answer. She started crying. Lily took the child by the hand. She said that fish are animals that live in water, that people used to catch fish every day, that fish used to be common. The child took another spoonful. He said he didn't understand why people had stopped catching them, if it tasted so good. Danny stood by the wall and listened. He clenched his fists in his pockets. Because the child had asked a question to which there was no good answer. People hadn't stopped fishing. People had destroyed the world where one could fish. Day 135. Danny went to the stream every day, without telekinesis, by hand. Tom made fishing rods out of wire and sticks. Ridge made a net out of cloth. The fish were coming. Not many, 10, 20 a day, but they were biting. The stream was alive, and it fed them. Danny thought about how the pigeon had been right. The stream wasn't just water. The stream was life. Day 140. A sound. At night. Danny woke up to a crash. He ran out into the square. The south wall was on fire. Fire, not accidental. Arrows wrapped in burning cloth stuck out of the tarpaulin. Someone was shooting from outside. Morgan was already on the wall. She was shouting orders. The fighters were taking their positions. Grant led her squad to the south gate. Ridge had vanished, disappeared into the darkness as always. Maya climbed the watchtower with her crossbow. Danny stood in the square and watched. He didn't run. He didn't hide. He was counting. There were 12 arrows. That meant at least 12 shooters. They were firing from the south. That meant they were flanking Haven where the wall was thinner. The fire on the wall was dying down. The tarpaulin wasn't burning well. It had gotten damp from the frost. Lucky break. A voice rang out from the darkness beyond the wall. Loud, steady, like static. Oskalok. Danny recognized the voice. Oskalok said time was up, that the assembly had decided, that the bearer of the gift must be returned to silence, that if Haven handed over the bearer, the city would be spared. If not, the city would burn. Morgan looked at Danny. Grant looked at Danny. 230 people looked at Danny. Silence. 1 second. 2. 3. Henry stepped forward. He stood next to Danny. He spoke loudly so everyone could hear. He said there were no carriers in Haven. There was a cook. There were people. There was a town. And the town doesn't give up its own. Press. The very same press who had suspected Danny for 3 months, who had kept records, who had demanded the truth. Press stepped forward. He stood next to Henry. He didn't say anything. He just stood there. Tom, Ridge, Sadie, Ji-yoon, Lily, Maya, Morgan, Grant. One by one, next to Danny. Danny stood and looked at them, at the people he had fed for 3 months, whom he had given water to, for whom he had built walls, for whom he had cooked porridge and soup and flatbread. They stood beside him, not because they knew his secret, but because they knew him. Silence behind the wall, then footsteps, receding. The glass ones had left. They hadn't attacked. 12 gunmen against a fortified city with 30 fighters and walls. Suicide. Shard knew that. It was a test, not of Haven, of Danny. They wanted to see if his own people would betray him. They didn't. In the morning, Danny sat on the roof, alone. His hands were shaking. Not from the cold, from what had happened. 230 people had stood up for him. For a cook from nowhere with a secret they didn't know. They stood up without a second thought. Lily climbed up to him, silently. She sat down next to him. They sat there for a long time, about 10 minutes. Then Lily said quietly that she knew. Danny turned to her. She said she knew he wasn't from here, not from this time, that his knowledge was too complete, too precise, that he speaks of things known only to those who have seen them with their own eyes. Day 160. Winter was retreating, slowly, reluctantly, like an army that has lost but refuses to admit it. The sky lightened from black to dark gray. The temperature rose to 0 during the day. The ice on the stream had thinned. The water flowed faster, louder, as if the stream had remembered how to speak. Haven had survived. 232 people had gone into winter. 232 had come out. Not a single one had died. Not a single one. Throughout the entire black winter. Danny knew it was a miracle. Not his miracle. A miracle of 232 people who held on to each other for 4 months in the darkness and cold. But he also knew that the miracle had to be secured, because the Reaper would return with spring. The glass ones would return with the warmth. And someone from the south, about whom he knew only rumors, might also come. The 165th day, spring. The first ray of sunlight pierced the dust at noon, thin, golden, like a needle. It fell on Haven Square, on the ground by the flagpole, on the stones that T had laid around the flower bed. Danny stood and watched the ray. People stood nearby, many, everyone who was in the square, silently. They watched the sunbeam as if it were a phenomenon, as if it were a miracle. Because for them it was a miracle. 4 months without the sun. And here it was. Someone laughed. Someone cried. A child ran after the ray, trying to step on the golden spot on the ground. Danny didn't laugh or cry. He was making plans. Spring meant work. A lot of work. The greenhouse. Ji-eun had been waiting for this moment all winter. Danny took out the plastic sheeting. The very same sheeting he'd haggled for from the Reaper through Ko in exchange for a month of hot deliveries. Construction-grade polyethylene, 20 meters, transparent. Ji-eun and Danny built the greenhouse for a week. A frame made of pipes, plastic sheeting on top, beds inside, soil mixed with coal and compost according to a recipe Danny had written down on the night of absolute memory. Ji-eun planted tomato seeds. She stood over the bed and looked at the ground. Danny stood beside her. She said that now they had to wait. Danny said he knew how to wait. Ji-eun looked at him. She said quietly that he wasn't like everyone else, that he didn't ask to be fed, that he fed himself. Danny said nothing, not because there was nothing to say, because the moment was one of those that words spoil. Day 170. The Reaper returned, not with war, with a problem. Cole came to Haven, pale, nervous. He said the Reaper needed help. His southern warehouse had been ransacked, 30% of the supplies. Someone came in the night, got past security, took everything. Professional, no trace, no clues. The Reaper is furious, but rage without an enemy is useless. Cole said the Reaper is asking for Danny, personally, to come, to take a look. Maybe he'll notice something. Danny went, with Maya and 2 fighters. The south warehouse, a former garage, large. The walls are intact, the gate is intact, the lock is intact. No signs of forced entry, but inside, it's empty. Where the bags of rice stood, it's empty. Where the cans stood, it's empty. Danny inspected the room, slowly, methodically, just as he would inspect a sales floor after taking inventory. Every corner, every shelf, every crevice. He found it, on the floor in the far corner, a scratch, fresh, in the shape of an arc, as if something heavy had been dragged in a circle. Danny crouched down, ran his finger over it. The dust around the scratch had been disturbed, but disturbed strangely. Not pushed aside, but as if blown away, or sucked in. He looked up. He looked at the ceiling. The ceiling was intact. The walls were intact. The floor was intact. No holes, no tunnels. The food had vanished from the locked room without any signs of entry or exit. Danny stood up. He looked at Maya. Maya was standing by the entrance. Her face was tense. She didn't understand either. Danny asked Cole to leave him alone for an hour. Cole left. Danny sat down on the floor in the center of the warehouse, and he thought. A locked room, no traces. The food had vanished. The only explanation that made sense. Someone with a superpower. Teleportation. Or phase shift. Or something he didn't know. But something from the can, from the fridge. Danny felt a chill. Not from the cold, from the realization. Someone else, here, in the sector, with the fridge. And this someone isn't feeding people. This someone is robbing. He went back to the Reaper, said the robbery was committed by a person with unusual abilities. The Reaper narrowed his eyes, asked what kind. Danny said he didn't know for sure, but that this wasn't an ordinary thief, and that ordinary walls wouldn't stop him. The Reaper asked what to do. Danny said they needed to move the remaining supplies to one place, a fortified one, with constant security, with people inside 24 hours a day. A person can't steal from a room if there are witnesses inside. The abilities work on objects, not on the attention of dozens of eyes. The Reaper nodded. Then he asked how Danny knew about these unusual abilities. Danny looked him in the eye. He said that there are things in the world he knows but can't explain. Not yet. The Danny looked at him for a long time. Then he said that Danny was the strangest cook he'd ever met. Danny replied that he was the strangest cook anyone had ever met. The Reaper smirked. Day 180, 6 months. Spring was gaining strength. The sky turned gray. Ordinary gray, not winter gray. The temperature rose to 15, then to 20. Haven came to life. Construction, expansion, new houses, new walls, new people. Families arrived every week. The word spread through the wastelands like wildfire. Haven, the place where they had survived the winter. Everyone, without loss. The place where there is a school, a hospital, a kitchen, where they serve fish soup and flatbread with herbs, where children learn the alphabet. 250 people, 300, 350. Danny couldn't keep up with the intake. Henry couldn't keep up with the counting. Morgan couldn't keep up with the verification. The town was growing faster than they could control. Danny called a council meeting. He said they needed a system, not a village, a town, with districts, with a government, with laws. Henry nodded. His time had come. The municipal lawyer set up the municipality. Haven was divided into 4 districts: residential, commercial, industrial, administrative. Each district had a ward leader. The ward leaders reported to the council. The council met once a week. Danny insisted on one rule: every resident works. No work, no food. Not cruelty, necessity. 200 mouths are 200 pairs of hands. 300 mouths are 300 pairs of hands. Hands build, mouths eat. Balance. Press suggested writing down the laws. Danny agreed. Press wrote for 2 days. It turned out to be 17 rules. Not a code, a foundation. Do not steal. Don't hit. Don't lie at the meeting. Don't ruin what belongs to everyone. Work, share, help. Danny read them. He added one. The 18th rule. Everyone has the right to a day off. 1 day a week. No work, no responsibilities. A day for yourself. Press looked at him like he was crazy. He said, there are no days off in the Wastelands. Danny said, that's exactly why everyone in the Wastelands is miserable. Henry agreed. Morgan shrugged. Grant said that in the army there are days off. And that's right. The rule was accepted. The first day off in Haven. Day 200. Haven. 400 people. Ji-eun's greenhouse yielded its first sprouts. Tomatoes. Green, small, like peas, but tomatoes. Ji-eun stood over the garden bed and watched them for an hour every morning. She didn't do anything, she just stood and watched, like a mother over a cradle. Danny brought her breakfast to the greenhouse, every morning, silently. He set the bowl on the edge of the garden bed. Then he left. Ji-eun ate without taking her eyes off the sprouts. Day 210. The Reaper came in person. Not with an army, with Cole and 2 guards. He walked through the gates of Haven, stopped in the square, looked at the houses, at the school from which children's voices could be heard, at the infirmary, at the kitchen, at the flag, at the people walking the streets. They weren't running, they weren't hiding, they were walking, just like in a normal city. The Reaper stood and watched. A minute, 2. Then he turned to Danny. He said quietly that in 23 years he hadn't seen anything like this. Danny asked what. The Reaper said, people who aren't afraid. Danny said nothing. The Reaper sat down at a table in the communal dining hall. Tom brought lunch: fish soup, flatbread, porridge with herbs, and a tomato. The first one, small, red, cut into 4 pieces. The Reaper looked at the tomato for a long time, as if it were a diamond. He took a slice, put it in his mouth, chewed slowly, closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were wet. He said the last time he'd eaten a tomato was 23 years ago, for breakfast, with scrambled eggs, in his kitchen in Providence, on the morning of the day when it all ended. Danny sat across from him, listening. The Reaper continued. He said he'd been a supply officer in the army, a good one. He knew how to transport, how to count, how to distribute. When the world collapsed, he did what he knew how to do. He supplied. First his platoon, then the garrison, then the district, then the sector. People came to him because he fed them. And then people began to fear him because he fed them. And then he began to use fear because fear worked faster than trust. And here he is, the food baron, the man hated by everyone he feeds. Danny listened. He didn't interrupt. The Reaper didn't need answers. The Reaper needed ears. A man who would listen. For 23 years, he had spoken only in orders. Danny was the first to listen. The Reaper fell silent. Then he said he had a problem. 3 communities in the South had refused to pay. They cited Haven. They said Haven didn't pay and lived better than anyone else. Why should they? A rebellion. Quiet for now, but a rebellion. The Reaper said he could crush them. But crushing 3 communities in the winter is one thing. Crushing 3 communities in the spring when everyone's looking elsewhere, that would show weakness. That rebellion is possible. That the Reaper is vulnerable, Danny thought, for a minute. Then he suggested, don't crush them. Expand the Haven model. The 3 communities don't want to pay with raw materials. Fine, let them pay with services. One community provides medical care, another builds, the third guards the roads. Each gains the status not of a vassal, but of a supplier, like Haven. The Reaper ceases to be a baron. The Reaper becomes the center of the network. Not fear, trade. Not submission, partnership. The Reaper listened. His expression shifted. Skepticism, calculation, interest, skepticism again. He said it works in theory. In practice, people fear the Baron. They don't respect a partner. Danny replied that they fear him until the first betrayal, but they respect him until the end. The Reaper stood up. He paced the dining hall. He thought. Then he stopped. He turned to Danny. He said he would try it, with one community. If it works, he'll expand it. If not, Danny nodded. The Reaper left. He turned around at the door. He said he was taking 3 tomatoes with him, for negotiations. A tomato on the negotiating table works better than a knife. Danny smiled. The Reaper was beginning to understand. Day 220. Danny reread Elliot's diary for the 5th time. He was looking for any mention of Verdant systems. He found a single line he'd missed before, a small one, in the margins, in pencil. Laboratory, Greenridge, Maine, Project Glass. Greenridge, Maine, Laboratory, the place where the refrigerators were created. Project Glass. Glass. The glass people. The connection. Danny sat in the basement and stared at that line. The glass people know about the refrigerators. The glass people call them sources. The project was called Glass. The glass people. It's no coincidence. One of the first users of the refrigerators, or one of the creators, founded a cult, or the cult grew out of knowledge of the project. Need more information. Need to get to Greenridge. State of Maine. Far away. Several hundred kilometers. Through the wastelands. Through territories no one controls. Through radiation zones. Through the lands of the glass people. Impossible. For now. Day 230. Danny was walking to the fridge at night. The usual route. 14 steps down. A hum. The door. A can. But this time he stopped. There were 2 cans on the shelf. Not 1, 2. That had never happened before. One ordinary one, everyday, blue, Verdant Surge. The ability to change the temperature of objects by touch. And the second one, black. No label, no inscription, smooth, heavy, colder than the rest. Danny picked up the black one, turned it over. Nothing. Not a word, not a symbol. Only on the bottom in small print. Network key, 1/3. Network key, 1 of 3. He remembered the screen on the panel. Network disconnected. Units detected 0/200. The network isn't working. And there it was, the key, the first of 3, to turn on the network, to connect 200 refrigerators, to see who else, where, what they're doing. Danny put the black can back, didn't open it. He didn't drink it. It wasn't a superpower. It was a tool. And you don't use tools until you understand what they do. He took the blue one, closed the fridge, went upstairs, stood under the stars. Stars for the first time this winter. Small, dim, but stars. The world was coming back, slowly. Danny stood there and thought about the 3 keys. About the 200 refrigerators. About the King of Thirst in the south. About the lab in Greenridge. About the glass people. About the Reaper who ate a tomato and cried. About Lily who taught the children the alphabet. About Sadie who healed in silence. About Ji-yoon who grew life from dead earth. About Maya who ate ramen in a tent and couldn't say thank you. About Henry who wiped his glasses when he was nervous. about Press, who kept records, about Ridge, who stayed for the porridge. Day 240. 1 year minus 125 days. Or simpler, 8 months. 8 months since Danny Cho stood in the basement of a Seattle store sorting energy drink samples by flavor. 8 months since the refrigerator sucked him into a world that wasn't supposed to exist. Now, this world was his, and he was of this world. Haven. 450 people. 5 communities had joined voluntarily over the past month, not by force, by choice. Because in Haven, they feed you, they heal you, they teach you, and they give you a day off. A word that had been forgotten 23 years ago. The Reaper had ceased to be the Reaper. Not immediately, not in a single day, but the process was underway. 3 southern communities had been granted supplier status. One treated the Reaper's wounded fighters. The second repaired the walls of his warehouses. The third guarded the southern caravan route. No one paid half. Everyone paid with their skills, and everyone ate better than before. Because Danny had sent a copy of his recipes to every community, over 200 of them, on sheets of paper, hand-copied. Lily and her students helped with the copying. Children who 3 months ago didn't know the alphabet were now copying bean paste recipes in neat, childish handwriting. Danny watched this and thought that this was what education was all about. Not abstract knowledge, knowledge that feeds. Marcus Holloway, former Reaper, now mayor of Haven's commercial district. He didn't want to. He resisted. He spat for 3 days. Then he agreed, because Danny did one thing. He gave Marcus a room, his own. No guards, no locks, no weapons at the door. The first night, Marcus didn't sleep. He sat on the bed and listened to the silence. Not the great silence, just the ordinary kind. The silence of a home where there's no need to be afraid. In the morning he came out. His face was gray. His eyes were red. He went to Danny. He said that for the first time in 20 years, he didn't need security to fall asleep, and that he hadn't fallen asleep because he didn't know how to sleep without fear. He'd forgotten how. Danny didn't say anything. He just set a mug of coffee in front of him, hot, black. Marcus drank and said nothing. A week later, he slept. 2 weeks later, he went out to the square and started working. He organized caravans. He counted supplies. He assigned routes. He did what he did best. Logistics. Without fear. Without threats. Just work. Day 250. A cake. Danny had been baking it for 3 days, in secret, with Tom's help, and Ji-Yoon's, and Sadie, who pulled a can of condensed milk from some of her own supplies. The base. Layers of flatbread. Cream between the layers. Cream made from condensed milk whipped with sugar that they'd traded for from a caravan. Berries on top. Berries. Ji-Yoon had grown them in the greenhouse. Small, red, sour, but berries. Real ones. Danny gathered everyone in the square. 450 people. He rolled out a cart, covered with a tarp. People stood in silence, waiting, thinking, food. Danny removed the tarp. A cake, layered, with cream, with berries. Silence. Absolute silence. 450 people looked at the cake and said nothing, because none of them had ever seen a cake. Ever. The children hadn't seen one because they were born after the silence. The adults hadn't seen one because they had forgotten. The elderly hadn't seen one because they had stopped believing such a thing was possible. Danny stood next to the cart. He looked at the people, at his people, at Haven, and he said, "We made it through the winter. Everyone. No one died. For the first time in 23 years in this sector, everyone is alive." Silence. Then Henry. Henry took off his glasses, didn't wipe them, set them aside, and clapped. One man. Then Tom. Then Ridge. Then Morgan. Then Grant. Then Press. Then Sadie. then Ji-yoon, then Maya, then Lily, then the children, then everyone. 450 people clapped in the square of a small town in the middle of the wastelands. And someone started singing Happy Birthday. Because Danny said so. He said that for everyone who doesn't remember their birthday, today is their birthday. 450 people sang Happy Birthday, out of tune, loudly, with tears, and with a cake. Danny cut the cake, small pieces, tiny ones, for 450 people. Everyone got 2 bites, maybe 3, but everyone got some. The child who asked what fish was tasted the frosting, stopped, looked at his mother, said it was like a cloud. His mother hugged him. Marcus Holloway, the former reaper, stood in the crowd, with a piece of cake in his palm. He ate it crumb by crumb, slowly, as if stretching out the moment, as if he knew that a moment like this might never happen again. Sadie stood by the first aid station, a mug in her hand. No coffee, empty, just a habit. She looked at the square, at the people, at the cake, at Danny. She looked at Danny for a long time. Then she turned away, because she didn't want anyone to see her face. But Danny saw. He always saw. 30 seconds of reading. For the first time in 5 years, Sadie Brooks allowed herself to hope. Ji-yoon stood next to the greenhouse. She ate her slice. She looked at the berries on the cake. Her berries, the ones she'd grown, in dead soil, in a world that had forgotten what berries were. And they were on the cake. And people were eating them, and crying at the taste. Ji-yoon wasn't crying. She was smiling. Quietly. Calmly. Like a person who has done the most important thing in their life, and knows it. Maya. Maya stood on the roof, alone, a crossbow on her back, chewing her slice, looking down at the people, who were singing and laughing, who were alive, who were her people, although she would never have said that out loud. Lily sat with the children, handing out pieces, to everyone, one by one, with a smile. She wished every child a happy birthday, to each one, by name, because she knew all their names, all 23 students, and those who came later, and those born in Haven. Yes, a child was born in Haven, the first one, 3 weeks ago, a girl. Her mother named her Hope. Lily held Hope in her arms, a tiny bundle in a blanket, asleep, unaware of what the wastelands are, what silence is, what hunger is, knowing only warmth and voices and the smell of milk. Danny watched them, all of them, and thought. 8 months ago, he was a merchandiser. He stocked shelves. He calculated conversion rates. He thought about KPIs, the most boring job in the world, the one everyone laughed at. And now? Now he stood in the square of the city he had built, among the people he had fed, with the cake he had baked, and a girl named Nadezhda, who slept unaware that the world was broken. Evening. The square was empty. People had gone home. Danny was cleaning up, sweeping up crumbs, gathering bowls, alone, out of habit. At the store, he was always the last one left. He cleaned the floor after closing. A light came on the hill above the city. Not a bonfire. Electric. Dim. Flickering. But electric. Abby. A 19-year-old girl in overalls with 100 pockets who had come to Haven a month ago. A mechanical genius. She fixed everything, from generators to radios. Danny gave her a project, a generator. She had been working on it for 4 weeks, and today, on Cake Day. The generator started working. The first electric light in Haven. The first electric light in the sector in 23 years. People came out of their houses. They looked at the hill, at the light bulb that burned in the darkness of the wasteland like a star. Small, yellow, alive. Danny climbed the hill. Lily was already there, standing and looking at the light bulb. Then she turned to Danny. She said quietly, "Daniel, you're not from this world." "I know, and I want you to stay." Danny looked at her, at the light bulb, at Haven below, at the campfires and the single electric light, at the children who had poured into the square and were pointing at the light bulb, who were shouting and laughing, who didn't know that there used to be billions of such light bulbs. To them, just one was a miracle. He looked at his Casio. The hands read 11:47 p.m., midnight in 13 minutes. Another can. For the first time in his life, he didn't want to know what was inside it, because everything he needed was already here. On this hill, in this town, in these people. Danny turned to Lily. He said he would stay. Lily smiled. Not widely, quietly. Like the light of a bulb on the hill. Warm and calm. Down below, the children were singing Happy Birthday. 450 voices. Off-key, loud, beautiful. Danny stood on the hill above Haven and listened. The wind blew from the east, smelling of earth. Not of smoke, not of metal, of earth. Somewhere far to the south, the king of thirst controlled the water and made plans. Somewhere to the east, the glass people waited in caves and believed. Somewhere in Green Ridge, Maine, stood a lab with the answers. Somewhere in the world, other refrigerators hummed. And somewhere, someone else stood in front of a door, deciding what to do with what was inside. But that was tomorrow. And today, a light bulb was burning in Haven, and 450 people were singing Happy Birthday. And in the square stood a cart of cake, and a girl named Nadezhda was sleeping in her teacher's arms. And the former reaper was learning to sleep without guards. And the sniper who'd come for some porridge was standing on the wall, gazing at the stars. And the farmer who grew life from dead earth was smiling in the darkness. And the nurse who hadn't cried in 5 years was drinking from an empty mug and hid her face. And a biker with a gold tooth sat on the roof with a crossbow and chewed on the last crumb of cake. And the diplomat who spoke 6 languages hadn't arrived yet, but she would come. And the mechanic in overalls with 100 pockets stood next to the generator and smiled at the light bulb like a child. And the merchandiser from Seattle stood on the hill and watched it all, and didn't want to know what was in the can. The Casio ticked. 11:58 p.m. 11:59 p.m. Midnight. Somewhere in the basement, the refrigerator clicked on. A new can. A new ability. A new day. Danny didn't go. In the morning. Tomorrow. Because today he was just a man who fed 450 other people cake. And that was enough. More than enough.